benefit or help, go to wesleyacademy.org.
Your home for Fox News, 1110 KFAB.
From the City of Angels off the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Noory, and welcome to Coast AM. Email in from Linda Topeka. Hurry, get on. I need my Coast to Coast fix. Well, here we are. Last hour of the program tonight, the near-Earth asteroid. It's called Apophis. How close will it come? Michael Horn joins us. Here's what's happening. The UN says rescue workers and relief goods are just pouring into Haiti now from around the world, but aid workers are running into huge problems reaching people trapped under buildings or trying to feed the hungry survivors. A UN spokesperson says the quake hit Haiti at a logistical nightmare level. The World Food Program says that the damage to Haiti's port in the capital of Port-au-Prince is preventing ship deliveries to quake-struck region areas. It said the city airport is open, but straining to handle dozens of incoming flights of supplies and rescuers. Desperate quake survivors, fearing more temblors, are also standing in the middle of roads, slowing the transport of food and other crucial aid. The World Health Organization said heavy damage to at least 8 Port-au-Prince hospitals is slowing doctors' abilities to treat the thousands of injured. Haitian officials have predicted a horrific death toll of more than 100,000, probably more, in the wake of the magnitude 7 quake that hit on Tuesday, that left most of the capital, Port-au-Prince, in rubble. It was a 7.0 magnitude, and the aftershocks are as big as most earthquakes hit most countries. President Barack Obama in the U.S., they've moved to take charge in the earthquake-ravaged Haiti, dispatching thousands of troops along with tons of aid to try to keep order as well as rescue and suffering in a country dysfunctional in the best of times. Tested with the very first large-scale humanitarian disaster of his presidency, President Obama ordered a relief effort of historic proportions, despite the deep strains that it was sure to put on both the U.S. budget and the military forces, who are already fighting 2 wars. He pledged an initial $100 million with the likelihood of more later. Yet somewhere along the line, people will complain that the U.S. just doesn't do enough. Amazing. The doomsday clock, a barometer of nuclear danger for the past 55 years, has been moved now 1 minute further away from the midnight hour. The concept timepiece, devised by the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, now stands at 6 minutes to the hour. The group said that it made this decision to move the clock back because of a more hopeful state of world affairs. Well, is it really a hopeful state of world affairs? John Curtis, onlinecolumnist.com. John, what do you think? Are we going the right way with this clock?
Well, this clock, of course, was designed for nuclear annihilation, and I think we're in a stage where we're going to be destroyed by a death by 1,000 cuts with terrorism, and the terror warnings have ratcheted up, George, and the TSA is out with new warnings telling people to get to airports 3 hours in advance for international flights right now, because they have information right now that there is a potential multiple terrorist attack that could be underway within the next 1 to 3 months. And a credible source who predicted the 9/11 attacks and who was who has worked for the Mossad, the Israeli security, has predicted there will be multiple attacks in the United States in 1 to 3 months. So I think we're nuclear annihilation, we may be a minute or so away from that, but I think we're moving closer to that death by 1,000 cuts through terrorism.
And, John, have you seen where the price of gasoline, at least on the West Coast, is slowly getting up to $4 a gallon again?
It's starting to escalate again, and I think again it's the fact that the U.S. dollar continues to deteriorate against foreign countries. These commodities continue to rise, and the oil companies are taking a very defensive posture about it. But it's yes, I have seen that. I don't know what the rest of the country are paying, but we're paying up to $3.50 to $4 now.
Here we go. John Curtis's website, onlinecolumnist.com. Dozens of cancer studies may be thrown into doubt now by the discovery that researchers inadvertently used the wrong type of cancer cells. The cell lines, according to the Journal of the National Cancer Institute, were supplied as samples of esophageal cancer. However, the tests show they contained other types of tumor, including lung and bowel. The Dutch researchers say this could put major trails of drugs in doubt. Showtime has an interesting program on called Dexter. It's about a serial killer, a forensics expert.
I'm going to tell you something that I've never told anyone before.
Okay.
I'm a serial killer.
Well, Dexter star Michael C. Hall is now undergoing treatment for cancer, and the disease is in remission. The actor has been diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, a cancer of the lymphatic system, which is part of the body's immune system. The disease is considered highly treatable with a potential for full recovery. The California Assembly's Public Safety Committee has voted 4-3 to approve a measure that would make it legal for those 21 and older to possess up to an ounce of marijuana for recreational use. Taxes and fees on the drug would generate an estimated $1.3 billion annually. The full legislature is not expected to consider the bill until next year. Dr. Robert Melamed is a professor and teacher at the University of Colorado and CEO of Cannabis Science. Robert has developed a throat lozenge for medical marijuana patients. Robert, I want to get your reaction to this, with California becoming the first state maybe to legalize marijuana. Is it going to work?
It certainly should. It's long overdue.
Will it really generate that kind of money for the state?
Well, money will go down as the price of cannabis goes down if they fully legalize it, so they may have some overestimates there, but there's a tremendous number of people who use marijuana medically and recreationally, and there's good sound reason, both historical and from the people and from modern science, that why there's the health benefits to using cannabis. It's essentially an anti-aging drug.
You know, Robert, I have long advocated the use for medical marijuana purposes. I have interviewed so many people who can't take prescription pharmaceutical drugs, pain pills. It seems to help them a lot. It's just a matter of a time, I think, before some of these other states begin to realize this too, don't you?
Well, they are. You know, Cannabis Science, CBIS, we're in fact in Colorado. And there was a wonderful article, editorial this morning, in our local newspaper, the Gazette, basically telling the state legislature to keep their hands off. Why would you want to have the government interfere with the only growth industry in the state? So it's already spreading to other states, and Colorado is a prime example.
Robert's website will be linked up with our Twitter feed at coasttocoastam.com. Almost 3 million homeowners received at least one foreclosure filing during 2009, setting a new record now for the number of people falling behind on their mortgage payments.
And everybody's up.
Yep, the Campbell Soup Company executive who is behind the enduring brands of SpaghettiOs and Chunky Soup has died. Donald Gerke was 83 years old. A Campbell spokesman confirmed that Gerke died of heart failure at his home in southern New Jersey. He was the marketing research director of Campbell's Franco-American line in the early 1960s, when his group started dreaming up pasta in shapes that would appeal to kids. He chose the O's, and they were marketed with the very unforgettable tagline, "Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs." Up next, two very special guests as we talk about Appalachian case studies, UFOs, sightings, and alien encounters. Kyle Lovin and Stanton Friedman. They're both next on Coast to Coast AM. It's a new year, so why are you waking up to the same old mattress and the same old back pain? Simply discover a revolution in sleep called the Sleep Number bed. And this bed is so revolutionary, it actually adjusts to the precise zone of comfort your body needs, simply by setting your sleep number. For example, I keep mine at 90, and boy, is it comfortable. In clinical studies, an amazing 93% of participants who slept on a Sleep Number bed reported back pain relief. You won't find a Sleep Number bed in an ordinary mattress store, and you can only find your Sleep Number at a Select Comfort Sleep Number store. Visit a Select Comfort Sleep Number store now during our white sale to find your Sleep Number, and right now for a limited time, save 40% on all Sleep Number Innovation Series limited edition beds. With more than 400 stores nationwide, there's a Select Comfort right around the corner. Find yours today by calling 1-800-390-9100. 1-800-390-9100.
I knew I had a problem, but I didn't know what to do about it.
I tried counting calories, I took pills, eating and eating, and then more eating.
I really wanted to stop, but nothing could make me stop.
At one point, it was so bad that I just felt like giving up.
I felt so alone, like nobody else could possibly understand.
We understand. We're Overeaters Anonymous, and we have helped thousands of people just like you. People who want to stop their compulsive eating and start living a healthy, rewarding life.
Overeaters Anonymous, help me get my life back.
Now I eat in a way that's healthy and good for me. I never realized what I was missing out on.
With OA, I am living again and loving it.
Start living the life you deserve with help from Overeaters Anonymous. In the U.S., call us at 505-891-2664 or find us on the web at oa.org.
Your home for Fox News, 1110 KFAB.
And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Noory. Two special guests for you tonight. Kyle Lovern is a UFO author and researcher from southern West Virginia. He's the author of Appalachian Case Study, UFO Sightings, Alien Encounters, and Unexplained Phenomena, Volumes 1 and 2. And as a very young boy and later as a teenager, Kyle personally witnessed UFOs and thus began his interest in the subject. That interest, by the way, led him to become a UFO researcher, investigator, author, and he's very interested in occurrences and sightings in his native Appalachian Mountains area. Hello, Kyle. How are you?
Hello, George.
Good to have you with us.
Oh, it's a real privilege to be on Coast to Coast.
And, of course, the father of modern-day ufology, none other than Stanton Friedman. He received his B.S. and M.S. degrees in physics at the University of Chicago, where Carl Sagan was a classmate. He worked for 14 years as a nuclear physicist for companies such as General Electric, General Motors, Westinghouse, and McDonnell Douglas on some very highly classified projects as nuclear aircraft and nuclear power plants for space. He has lectured on the topic of UFOs to hundreds of colleges and professional groups all over the map. Here he is, Stanton Friedman. Hey, Stanton, how are you?
Well, for the middle of the night, I'm fine.
Well, we shaved an hour for you. We got you to start a little earlier tonight. How about that?
Yeah, that's great, George. I really appreciate that.
So I'm looking at Kyle's two books, 1 and 2, and on the back, there's a picture of you on Volume 1.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the relationship with Kyle.
Well, I was in West Virginia. Well, I've been there several times, but primarily because of Frank Ficino, whose book, Shoot Them Down, deals with West Virginia, and especially the Flatwoods Monster case of September 12th, 1952. And they've had some celebrations back there. I was there for the 50th anniversary. Makes me feel old to say that. I wasn't there 50 years ago, but I was interested 50 years ago. Anyway, so I got to know Frank pretty well, and then I was there again this past year and the year before, got to meet Kyle, and he interviewed me. As a matter of fact, one of the interviews is in the first volume of his 2 volumes, and I mean, how could I not go on with a guy who puts my picture on the back of his book and
Smart
living
guy,
color,
right?
You know.
I love it.
So we've had some conversations since then, and I would like to encourage everybody who's trying to get involved in ufology to collect, as Kyle did, a number of reports in their local area. It's a lot easier than you think it is. That is,
sightings are much more common than most people think they are. Everybody seems to think if they've had a sighting, hey, nobody else has, and I better not talk about it because they're going to laugh at me and so forth and so on. But at the end of my lectures, I typically ask how many people in the audience believe they've seen what I would consider to be a UFO. Having a flying saucer is the term I use. I prefer that. Having defined my terms at the beginning of the lecture, and the hands go up slowly at the beginning. To make a long story short, typically it's 10% of the audience, which surprises everybody. But then I ask, how many of you reported what you saw? 90% of the hands go down. So it's that difference between those who are willing to report what they saw and those who have actually seen things, which is a much larger number. And if we could get everybody or somebody in each part of the country to do what Kyle has done and collect the local reports, we'd have one heck of a large volume of sightings. They're really not hard to find as long as people think it's safe to talk about them.
That's true. That is so true. And Kyle, you tell us about your passion here, beyond your research.
Well, it is a passion. It's just something I've always been interested in, and I was lucky to find a publisher, Woodland Press, here in southern West Virginia, that was willing to publish my books and looked at my work, and I'm just really lucky to do it. As Stan was just saying, so many people, I think, were hesitant about reporting their sightings, because of the stereotype or the stigma. But I find out now that my name is out there, that more and more people are contacting me. There's hardly a day goes by. For example, today I was eating lunch and someone told me about a sighting they had. I got home, I had a packet in the mail. A minister from a town in West Virginia had read one of my books. He wrote me a real nice letter and talked about two sightings he had in 1968 1975, and he said I was too reluctant to tell anyone about what I'd witnessed. But now he's going to share the stories with me. I think they feel comfortable with me being a small-town newspaper reporter, and more and more people, it seem like, are willing to share their sightings and their stories with me.
I was going to say, your investigative news background shines when I was reading the 2 volumes. It's there, you can tell.
I appreciate that. I know a couple of my reviews that people have written, they said they could tell I was a journalist because of how I wrote the reports, but that's how I feel like it's a good way to get the stories out there, and it's realistic.
Now, and your research is primarily, Kyle, around West Virginia, Kentucky, and Virginia, right?
Right.
In those areas. Why those areas?
Well, I grew up here in West Virginia, right on the border of Kentucky, southwestern West Virginia, eastern Kentucky, so it's an area I knew. And I always knew there was a lot of sightings in this area in Appalachia, but I don't think anyone had really written about them, and people had no place to report them, or they didn't know where to report them. A lot of people don't know about MUFON or the National UFO Reporting Center. And I thought, if I come out with this book, and then, as you see, it's led to a Volume 2, and I'm already working on a Volume 3, that people would have an outlet to report their sightings. And as Stan said, there's a lot of people out there that have had sightings, but they just are leery of reporting them. But I'm slowly, I think, breaking down that wall, and more people are contacting me. And, like I say, my wife and I were out Christmas shopping about a month ago, and someone stopped me, said, "Hey, I read your book, and I had a sighting around the same time." And I'm just like, it's almost every day.
Sure.
So.
And Stanton, you have done a lot of research over the years. Anything specific about this region, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Virginia? Because wasn't some of Frank's work in that region too?
Well, yeah, that's the whole focus, is West Virginia, Flatwoods, West Virginia, just up the road 60 miles or so from Charleston, West Virginia, the capital, Braxton County. We're talking mostly small towns up there. Flatwoods is certainly a small town. And so, that's the place. And Flatwoods got a lot of publicity back in 52. Briefly, and matter of fact, the people involved, Mrs. May, was on national television, and the program was canceled 2 weeks later.
That happens.
Whatever's going on there. But I'm sure, you're listening. I've spoken in all 50 states. states and 9 provinces, and there's no shortage of cases wherever I go. So we could turn it around if we can get the media to get off its butt. I'm thinking, I don't know how many people saw Time Magazine on December 17th this past year, which had a terrible article on UFOs. And just to give you some idea, it says, quote, UFO sightings have been officially recorded in Canada, Sweden, Denmark, Greece, Australia, and the United Kingdom. Well, Ted Phillips has sightings from 90 countries, and they list, 6 besides the U.S. And there's a lot else wrong with it, and I love this juxtaposition. It wasn't until the 1970s when Vietnam and Watergate sparked a revival in anti-government conspiracy theories that the word Roswell started pricking ears.
Oh, I bet that drove you nuts.
Yes, it did. And it's just incredible. Here's a major publication. I guess Time is still a major publication despite their shortcomings, saying nonsense. And it's something I run into all over. It's not that I get a hard time, as I keep telling people to their surprise. I've only had 11 hecklers and over 700 lectures, and 2 of those guys were drunk, you know. That's doing pretty good, even though I come on, how shall I say this, enthusiastically pro-UFO. How's that, George?
Yes, you are. Well, what is so unusual, Stanton, about this region? Or is there anything
I don't think there's anything unusual about it. The roads are a lot better than they used to be when I first went down there. And they still have, anybody want an interesting experience in an airplane, take off for land at the Charleston airport. You come in, and it's a high sort of mesa-like area, and you're landing. You're flying over, the ground's pretty far down there, and then suddenly you're landing. When you take off, if you look down when you take off, holy cow, what happened to the land?
That's right. And Kyle, when we come back from the break, I want to talk about some case studies here. But have they kept you busy, these reports?
Oh, yeah. And like I say, now after the first book came out, a lot of people have started contacting me, and now it's just a wave of people contacting me.
What was the time difference between volumes 1 and 2?
Just about a year.
That's not bad.
No.
Not bad at all. The artwork is great, by the way, and the covers are fantastic. One would think that they might even be very real. You never know. How do we get to your website, Kyle?
It's KyleLovernUFOs.com.
Lovern.
Yeah.
Right? All right. And Stanton, of course, we know. StantonFriedman.com. And if you need to email me, you make that George at coasttocoastam.com as well. And by the way, for the relief in Haiti, we've got a link to the American Red Cross if you are so inclined. Okay? We'll be back in a moment with Stanton Friedman and Kyle Lovern in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM.
Sign up now for Coast Zone, our free email newsletter. Get it today at coasttocoastam.com.
That's why they call it the good life.
Coming Friday on the Good Morning Show, a lot of us want to give earthquake relief in Haiti, but the Better Business Bureau says, get careful. Get Healy with the tail 7:15 Friday on 11:10 KFAV.
I should have known you did me farewell. There's a lesson to be learned from this, and I learned it very well. Now I know you're not the only starfish in the sea. If I never hear your name again, it's all the same to me. And I think it's gonna be alright. Yeah, the worst is over now. The morning sun is shining like a red rubber ball.
From the City of Angels. This is Coast to Coast AM with George Noory.
Hey, have you signed up for Streamlink yet? Well, you can. You get your iPhone apps, your podcasting, your special downloads, and your old archives of shows years gone past. It's a neat way for just pennies a day to enjoy Coast to Coast AM. When we come back, we're going to enjoy Stanton Friedman and Kyle Lovern as we talk about Appalachian case studies, UFO, sightings, and alien encounters. We'll be back.
We don't get many second chances. This one could save your life. A TIA, or transient ischemic stroke, is a mini-stroke. Symptoms usually go away within 24 hours and you feel fine again. But if you don't get to a stroke center or hospital fast, you risk a full-fledged stroke that can change your life forever. Don't take that chance. Contact National Stroke Association at 1-800-STROKES or visit stroke.org and find out more about recognizing stroke symptoms fast. Do it now, while there's still time.
Let's have an economist explain the value of the dollar.
The dollar's strength factors in the exchange rate with several foreign currencies.
Okay, let's have an ACE customer explain the value of the dollar.
I got this GE energy-saving light bulb for $1.
That's more like it. Now through Monday at the Ace Dollar Day sale, we've cut prices on almost everything. From light bulbs for $1 to a 32-gallon trash can for $8. Get in, get help, get on with your life. Ace, the helpful place. Price is good at participating stores while supplies last. See store for details.
Kevin Richards is concerned about sending his identity out into the world.
Oh, no. What now?
Hey, Gav, you know how you're always going on how I can't protect myself?
Yeah, because you can't.
I can. I'm taking karate. Any of those bad guys try to snatch me up? Ooh, whammo.
Wait, stop, okay? No, you're just a bundle of numbers and personal data.
Who can handle himself?
And you broke it.
You see that? Karate.
Wondering where your identity goes? It's time to get total protection from Identity Guard. You'll get the kind of protection and information that helps you keep track of what your identity is up to 24/7, so you know what's going on. It's protection no matter where your identity goes. Identity Guard, making it okay to trust again.
Did you know that you can also use a credit card as a weapon?
Ow! Okay, now I do know.
Visit IdentityGuard.com today. That's IdentityGuard.com.
On air, online, on demand, KFAB.com.
Stanton, I understand you're doing some course instruction for the International Metaphysical University, which is kind of cool. These are online classes?
Not yet. I told them that I have to finish my new book, which finally went in 2 weeks ago. That's Science Was Wrong. I know that'll come as a surprise to you, George.
We look forward to a full show with you on that one.
That one, that's done, and it's due out in June. I notice Amazon's already taken orders for it. They get on the ball early.
So all you got to do is put your name on it, and it sells.
Well, I hope so. And, you know, it's a funny thing. I've been attacking the anti-scientific, as I call it, approach of the debunkers about UFOs, but for years and years. But for the last couple of years, Kathleen Marden and we co-authored, captured the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience. She did most of the work. She's Betty's niece, of course. And but I hadn't fully appreciated until we started work on this book in how many other areas people with a lot of degrees after their names have made stupid comments that have stood in the way of progress, that have caused deaths of people in the medical world and all that sort of thing. And, you know, it's kind of scary when you look at some of the dumb things that have been said. And so I haven't yet put together my package for the that online university. I probably will because, you know, I'm an old guy and it gives me something to do at home.
Yeah, and they got some good people behind it, too. Paula Harris and some folks like that.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to doing something. And, you know, where I live, it was 12 degrees outside.
Well, it's a heat wave. When I was in St. Louis, it was 5. Remember that?
Yeah, and it was 6 here yesterday, so it's warming up. But, you know, it's nice to be able to do things at home. And I'll tell you, frankly, George, when I see how much trouble it is in flying around, I only have a few lectures booked.
And it's only going to get worse, Dan.
I know it. And so I'm so glad I'm not going to be on the road for months. And that's a good thing. Fredericton, New Brunswick, where I live, is not the world's largest city. I mean, it's the capital of the picture province of New Brunswick, but we don't have direct flights to the States. Got to go through Montreal or Toronto or Ottawa or Halifax or someplace. And so, if you think one flight is bad, when you got to go through security twice, oh boy. So I am glad, frankly. I mean, when they start talking about get to the airport 3 hours before you're going to fly.
It's pain in the neck. It sure is.
Yeah. So doing something at home is a good way to go, and it would be an interesting thing for me. I've done a lot of classroom visits on campuses.
More than 600.
Well, that's lectures for the public.
Yeah.
And many of those campuses I've also gone into the classroom. Everything from, would you believe, phys ed to English to physics and so forth. Now, I must admit, sometimes the physics one, I hear tell from the students that I deal with that the prof is ready to, chop me up into small pieces. That doesn't happen because, and it's part of the theme of the book in a sense, here are people who make claims who haven't studied the evidence at all, but are sure if there was anything to it, they would have known about it, and they don't, so there must not be. And anybody who says flying saucers are real, which is usually the title of the talk, must be some kind of a nut. And I love taking these guys apart in front of the students.
I know that. And let's bring Kyle in here. Kyle, with your work, why so many UFO sightings in your region?
Well, I think it's probably because it's a sparsely populated region, a lot of small towns, rural country roads, mountainous region, and, if the UFOs and whoever is flying them didn't want to be detected, what better place to be than over a mountainous region like the Appalachians. And, there's a lot of sightings with people, or, they'll be driving down a country road, a little two-lane road, and when they see these sightings, and they'll be the only car around. And, I just think it's a good place for them to come down, and if they're gathering flora or, vegetation and doing experiments, it would be a good place for them to hover over and gather up what they needed to do.
Well, I should add here that this past month's MUFON report of 465, I think it is, sightings, there weren't any from West Virginia. It isn't fair, Kyle.
Well, they just need to get my books, and they'll see there's plenty from West Virginia and Kentucky. Again, a lot of folks, they don't know where to report them. They don't know about MUFON, or the mainstream media doesn't report many UFO sightings, and but now I'm trying to give them an outlet, and the stories are pouring in.
Now let's talk about some of the cases in your home state and in that region, and also why are these people so open up to you now? I mean, they're comfortable with you.
Yeah, that's it. I think they are comfortable with me because I'm a small town guy. I make them feel comfortable. I don't make fun of them. They know that I believe their stories, that I do believe in UFOs. And as they feel more comfortable, they're willing to open up and tell me their stories. So many people that have related their stories to me, it's the first time they've ever told anyone. And I feel privileged that they feel that comfortable with sharing the story with me. What I like from my first book to the second one, most of the people in the first book still wanted me to use an anonymous name. But in the second book, a lot of people went on record. They let me use their name. They let me take their picture. And, I don't care. I saw something. So, I don't care who knows, and they really opened up, and that's good. I'd like to see more people.
Why do you think the change? Why do you think within a year or two people tend to open up a little bit more now where they don't care whether their names are used?
I think shows that you see on the History Channel, the Discovery Channel, National Geographic, you're seeing more and more UFO documentaries, and you're seeing more of those kinds of programs on TV, and people are seeing that other people are having sightings or alien encounters, and they know that they're not the only ones. And then once they see all the other stories that I've gathered and wrote about, they feel more comfortable about reporting their stories.
Give us one of your favorites from at least your home state.
Okay. In the first book, a guy from Wayne County, got to know him real well, real down-to-earth guy, soul of the earth, as you would say. He had a couple of sightings. The first one was back in 1968. He was just an 18-year-old kid, just graduated from a small high school, and he was going up a dirt road up on the mountain, had his .22 rifle, was going to go hunting, and let me just read a little excerpt here. He said it was no more than 30 yards away. He said, I know this sounds crazy, but the way I can describe the way it looked was like the bottom of an Norelco electric razor. Basically, it was three triangular-shaped UFO, which you hear more of now, not just the past, was always disc-shaped or whatever. I just thought his description, it was real, and I loved that quote. And he went on to, watch it for a while before it took off. Then a few years later, he was drafted, and he went to Vietnam. He comes back. He starts a family. He gets a job with the Postal Service. One morning they call him out early, like 5 o'clock in the morning. He gets up. He's driving to work down, again, a 2-lane rural road, and he says off to the left he saw something like a bright light, which he thought at first was a brush fire. But then his car began to stall. The radio went off, typical, which we've heard of many other stories. And he watched this, and of course it ended up being a ball of light over on a nearby hillside from where he was at. And eventually his car started. He just went on into work. Once he got to work, he realized that there was like an hour of missing time. So it makes you wonder what happened during that time. Was he abducted? He doesn't know, but the evidence is there that it very well could have been an abduction case. But again, just a good, credible witness. A lot of my witnesses are that way. They're ministers, they're former military people, policemen, just good, hard-working people, and they have good stories to tell.
Stanton, what are the possibilities of military intervention here, that this might be craft that the government has?
Well, I'm sure that on occasion people have seen, quote, secret, unquote, vehicles, but remember that as a general rule, you don't test these anywhere out in public. That's why Area 51 is there, for example. You can't break through the fence unless you're a darn fool and try that. But I think if you go back in time a bit, remember Roswell happened in 47. We didn't have any vehicles that could move in the strange ways UFOs
No way.
move.
That's true.
And when people say, oh, it was just German technology, I say, so, okay, why didn't they use it during the war? And people say, well, we copied that. Again, there have been a lot of wars. That's why you spend all the money on advanced propulsion systems, if you will, special behavior airplanes, copters, whatever, is for military purposes. The stealth fighter cost $10 billion to develop over 10 years, and we used it in a war. And so the great majority of sightings clearly are not ours. And one of the things in the book, Shoot Them Down, is a list of 200 military crashes between aircraft, fatal aircraft crashes, not just little accidents, between 51 and 56, including 5 pilots who had over 100 missions in Korea where, you remember, MiGs were trying to shoot them down?
Sure.
And they come back to the United States where there weren't any MiGs, as far as we know, and they crash. And the New York Times used words like disintegrated and disappeared for some of these cases. And so orders were issued in 1952, military orders, shoot them down if they don't land when instructed to do so.
But there was no way we could battle them, Stanton.
Well, look, apparently guys were instructed, do what you can. Get rid of these guys. We need the record so we can try to back engineer or whatever. And I have heard, in the course of my lecturing, 7 different cases where more planes went up than came back. And if I've heard 7, there had to be a lot more than that. And if these are ours, what the heck are they doing shooting down our airplanes, you know?
Exactly.
I had a story in my second book, and you probably have heard about Captain Thomas Mantell, which was down over Kentucky. It's a classic story, and I used it because it was in Kentucky. And that was in 1948, so just what Stanton was saying, you know. What was he doing chasing this in the first place?
Tell us the story for those who do not know the case, Kyle.
Okay, well, it was just after World War II. Mantell was a military pilot. There was some UFOs over Kentucky. They dispatched the Air National Guard after these circular objects that were spotted. He and a couple other pilots were chasing this UFO. The other guys backed off, and he continued to do so. And something happened as he got closer to the craft in his Mustang fighter, and eventually went down. And, of course, many think that he was shot down by this UFO because he was trying to, you know, chase it, maybe even get into a dogfight with it. And, you know, it's definitely a classic case of where a military plane had intervention with a UFO, and the pilot, of course, crashed out.
What the dust? What have been some of the time periods, Kyle, of these stories, these UFO cases?
They're from the 50s, 60s, 70s on up until recently. You know, I've got one story here that I really like in Volume 2 from Moorhead, Kentucky. If you look at the book, it's called about the Screaming Woman. But again, another credible witness, a college professor and his 2 sons were coming home one evening in late November of 2003. They saw a UFO for probably 15 minutes. They pulled off because they were near their house in their subdivision. They finally went on up in their driveway, went into the house and went up on the second floor to try to get a better view of it. It looked like it landed in a little knoll near their neighborhood. And in the meantime, his 2 sons went back outside, and they, along with some neighbors, heard a woman screaming. And, of course, other people heard the screaming, so they called 911, and first responders came out. You had police, fire coming out to investigate the screams. But then this UFO just took off. Again, it was gone in an instant. They could never really explain what the screams were, but it's a real mysterious case. And again, that was just in 2003. So, you know, they go from the early 50s, even late 40s, all the way up until recently. So it's just every decade people have stories.
You're an investigative reporter, Kyle. You've come away from all these case studies. Lots of eyewitnesses talking to you directly.
Right.
Have you come up with conclusions?
I really believe that most of these people feel strongly that they saw a UFO, and also have had a couple of people that feel strongly that they were abducted by aliens. And after talking to them, my conclusion is that they did see UFOs, and they did have close encounters. There's no doubt in my mind.
Stan, what do you think of this abduction phenomenon?
Well, each case has to be treated on its own merits. As I mentioned earlier, Kathleen Martin and I did capture the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience, and certainly I think it was real, it was alien, I think they were abducted. If you could hear the terror in their voices on the tapes that were made by Dr. Benjamin Simon, who used medical hypnosis to get the facts out, if you will. He actually had to stop one session each. They were hypnotized separately. And for both of them, there was one session where he actually stopped because the terror was so great in their voices. He wasn't sure that they could handle it, reliving the experience. Remember, this is reliving, not retelling. And right. You need a context here. Dr. Simon worked with thousands of World War II veterans who today we would say were suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome. You know, World War II guys. He ran a hospital that had 3,000 beds for such people. You know, people think it's a new phenomenon coming back from the Middle East these days, Afghanistan or Iraq or whatever. It isn't a new phenomenon. Vets were having a terrible time. There is a big difference. More have survived today because of better medical care. And so before, many of them wouldn't survive, and their post-traumatic stress syndrome didn't matter. They were gone, So I think many people, many earthlings, give it a context, have been abducted by some aliens. If people are reluctant to report just a common run-of-the-mill UFO sighting, how much more reluctant they are to even insinuate that they might have been abducted, that there's a missing time period and all the rest of that.
That's true. I would say that was probably pretty high, that they won't say anything.
That's right. And so the thing about the Hill case, Dr. Simon didn't know anything about flying saucers, but he knew an awful lot about helping people relive their experience. And we have him in writing saying that the emotional intensity was every bit as great for them as it was for any of these war veterans he had dealt with. And that's saying a lot for a man in his circumstances.
After I interviewed you, Stanton, in 1971, when you were at Oakland University in the Detroit area, I turned right around and interviewed on the phone Benjamin Simon about that case, because you talked a lot about it. And I've got to tell you, it was fascinating. I can't find the tapes, of course.
Naturally, George.
Can't find the tapes, but fascinating interview as well. And you're right. He went into this as a true psychiatrist, a doctor studying this. He didn't know anything about UFOs. Nothing.
That's right. And it's so nice in that case that you're dealing with two ultra-respectable people. I mean, Betty, people tend to forget, Betty was a social worker, head of the adoptions part for the state of New Hampshire. This wasn't somebody who swept the floor out there. Nothing wrong with people who sweep floors, I don't mean that. But she had a position in which she had to be trusted by people. That's why they were so opposed to going public with the case. And the reporter said, "The heck with you guys, I'm going public." Who found out about it because somebody revealed a tape they shouldn't have revealed. And Barney was on the governor's civil rights.
Let's talk a little bit about how this affected their life, Stanton, when we come back, as well as more of the case studies in Appalachia with Kyle Lovern on Coast to Coast AM.
Was helped by Teen Challenge.
I never got accepted as a young kid, always the last kid picked on.
Child safety. A message from the U.S. Department of Transportation and the Ad Council.
Your home for Fox News, 1110 KFAB.
Coast AM with George Noory.
And tonight we have two special guests for you for the main show, Stanton Friedman and Kyle Lovern, as we talk about Appalachian case study UFO sightings, alien encounters, and unexplained phenomena. We're also talking with Stanton Friedman about his expertise, of course, so we'll be Talking with both of them in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. You know, there's most likely a regular light bulb in your house. Look around that you'd like to keep on all night for safety reasons, but it's using up a lot of energy. Sea Crane has a new way to replace these always-on bulbs with a new and more energy-efficient way. It's called the new GeoBulb 3 LED light bulb, and it puts out as much light as a 50 or 60-watt bulb, but it only uses 7 watts of power. That's half the energy of a compact fluorescent and almost 90% less than an incandescent bulb. The GeoBulb 3 doesn't contain any mercury or lead. It's rated to last 50,000 hours, so you figure that out. And it's got a 5-year warranty attached to it. And by the way, it's the same standard size. It'll fit into any lamp. The GeoBulb 3 is now at a reduced price of $69.95. Seems like a high price, but the total cost of the GeoBulb 3, including electricity, will cost you much less than a similar incandescent bulb over a 5-year period. So if you like long-term things, this is it. For more information on the GeoBulb 3 and all of Sea Crane's LED light bulbs, call them at 1-800-522-8863. That's 1-800-522-8863. You can also go online to this website, geobulb.com.
Kevin Richards is sending his identity out shopping.
Okay, you're going to go get me some new golf clubs.
Yeah, sure, I got it.
Go directly to the retailers, and you don't talk to the strangers.
Right. Go directly to the strangers, don't talk to the retailers.
No! Oh!
Wondering where your identity goes? Get Identity Guard, and you'll see all your important financial and personal records in just a few clicks. Identity Guard, making it okay to trust again. Visit IdentityGuard.com. That's IdentityGuard.com.
Thank you for seeing us, Doctor. Danny's been warm, and with all this talk about the flu...
H1N1 is a concern, and fever is one of the first symptoms. So let's get Danny's temperature first. A slight fever.
What kind of thermometer is that?
The Exergen Temporal Scanner Thermometer. Just a quick, gentle scan across the forehead gives you a fast, accurate reading. We're using it for all our patients and at the hospital.
Wow. I wish I had one of those at home to keep an eye on Danny's fever.
Home model available at Target and other fine retailers.
1110 KFAB. On air, online, on demand.
Stanton, after Look magazine did the story of Betty and Barney Hill.
Yes.
What happened to their life? Did this affect them at all?
Well, yeah, it did. At first, they were very concerned, of course, when the book came out, they were going to lose their jobs and so forth. I mean, actually, they were concerned earlier when the first newspaper articles came out, and it was because of the newspaper articles that John Fuller, who had done the Incident at Exeter book, talked to them. Their lives changed. Now, remember, Barney died early in 1969. I met him in 68, and saw Betty many times after that. But certainly, from Betty's viewpoint, over the next umpteen years, she was hoping to see more UFOs. She would take people out to see UFOs, and part of this was because people felt they could talk to her about their sightings. As Kyle indicated, people want to talk when they feel it's safe. And so she became sort of an investigator of one, and did go out in rural New Hampshire and did on occasion see UFOs in the sky. Many times people felt she was looking at lights in the sky, airplanes or whatever. But they became sort of celebrities. I mean, she did, Betty and I did the Tom Snyder show, Tomorrow Show. When the movie came out with James Earl Jones, the UFO incident, that was in 1975. The original experience was 61. So that brought a lot more. A lot of people saw that show. It surprised me. I'm not a late-night TV watcher, but I'm sure a lot of people who saw our show and then watched the movie. And so she did stay sort of in the public light, and she did write a book, A Common Sense Approach to UFOs. Kathleen still has a few copies of those. She has all her files. And incidentally, the University of New Hampshire Library has archived a whole bunch of stuff about the Betty and Barney Hill case. They consider it respectable, if you will. And so it affected her life. Now, I should add, they were very active in civil rights activities. And as a matter of fact, they were invited to Lyndon Johnson's inauguration, and they went. Kathleen went with them. Remember, Barney was black, Betty was white. That's not a big deal today, but
it was then.
It certainly was then, and that was Barney's big worry, that if there was any publicity about their experience, it would ruin his civil rights activities. He worked. They lived in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and Pease Air Force Base is around the corner, so to speak. He worked with guys out at the base on civil rights issues, and so they were active in their community. They were active in their church. They led a very respectable life, and they didn't want anything to do with big noise. Remember, there was no precedent. There was nobody to say, oh, they copied somebody's story. Well, there wasn't no story to copy.
No, it was theirs.
Yeah, I mean, this is the original one. And, again, fortunately, because of Dr. Simon, we have a lot of data. And, of course, there was a star map work that I was the first to publish about that a long time ago, which gives us a hint as to where, a clue as to where those guys might originate. And it's kind of funny, George. Right now, within the past 10 days or so, there's been a lot of fuss about the Kepler spacecraft, which has, in its first time around, went up last March, but just releasing the first batch of data, has found 5 more exoplanets, planets outside our solar system. And people are getting excited about, if there are other planets, as we now know there are, that makes it more likely that there might be life out there, and a big deal. I mean, the Kepler cost $1 billion or so, you know. But none of these guys want to deal at all with the data indicating aliens are visiting. You know, it's okay. Yeah. They're out there somewhere. It's all right. Don't worry about it. And I suppose it's because astronomers like to deal with things that can't think, stars and planets and comets and asteroids and stuff like that. When it comes to dealing with stuff where there might be an intelligence at the other end, they're lost. They don't like eyewitness testimony. They'll tell you that's the worst form of evidence. Of course, we forget that scientists looking at dials, that's eyewitness testimony too. And, you know, they want you to drop a body in their hands, you know, or a craft. Here, let's go for a ride. You'll see these things are real. That's a nonsensical approach. Ask the courts. They have to deal with things involving intelligence or lack thereof, you know, airplane crashes, automobile crashes, robberies, stuff like that, where you have to use the methods of science to evaluate evidence. And so I find the contrast between wanting to deal with all the enormous amount of evidence we have that aliens are coming here. No, let's look at what's going on out there, way out there. You know, we'll learn, and maybe in decades we'll be able to say it's likely that there's life out there. That's pretty silly when you think about it. That's why I call SETI, for example, a silly effort to investigate. It assumes one of the strangest assumptions around. Aliens, if they're out there, but they're using our kind of communications technology. And, George, I hate to say it to you as a radio broadcaster, but I really don't think anybody that might be, say, 100 years ahead of us, or 1,000 or 1,000,000, is going to be using our kind of technology.
No, I don't think so. That's the one thing I disagree with Seth Shostak about as well. They're into a different form of technology. There's no doubt.
I would certainly expect so. I mean, I'm not using a slide rule anymore, George.
Remember those things? Oh, yeah.
I asked 2 classes of students at the University of Detroit, George.
My alma mater.
Yeah, in the afternoon before my lecture there a few years back, I was going over how much technology has changed in the last, 100 years or so. And I said, when I started work in industry, I was using a slide rule. I looked around the class, didn't see any reaction at all.
They didn't even know what they were, did they?
Well, I asked. I had the gall to ask, any of you know what a slide rule is? Not one person in those two classes.
And then the big Texas Instrument calculator came out. Remember that one?
Yeah, it was only, $400 the first time around.
Exactly. Now you can buy them for $1 or so. Anyways, let's bring Kyle into this, too. Kyle, with your interviews, what do they see the most? What do they describe?
Well, different types of UFOs. Of course, the usual disc shape, some circular shape, some triangular shape, some cigar shape. What amazes me is the ones that are so huge that, as people commonly describe, as big as 3 football fields.
And these are primarily the triangular-shaped ones?
Yeah. There's one case I read about in Meteor, West Virginia, which is the home of the Hatfield-McCoy feud. I'm sure everybody's heard of that. A couple of guys talk about it. In fact, they both had worked in radio. But it reminded me a lot of the Phoenix Lights, how those were described.
That's right. Same thing. Also, police officers in Millstadt, Illinois, saw the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
So you're seeing these described all over the United States, all over the world, similar sightings. These people have no contact with each other. And, as Stan said, there's been a lot of wasted money spent on some of these studies when they should be spending the money on other ways to prove this reality or to uncover the government cover-up.
The cosmic Watergate.
Exactly.
Well, that's probably what it is. I've had some guests, Stan, that they truly believe we're going to get disclosure and that the president will, go on national television and tell us. I don't think it's going to happen that way, Stan, do you?
No, I don't. And remember, I heard notions like that during President Carter's administration. The Washington Whispers column of U.S. News and World Report was saying within a couple of weeks there's going to be a big disclosure. It didn't happen, and there have been many times since when it didn't happen. And, people forget. People are shocked when I say, I don't think everything should be released. Well, why not? Aren't we entitled? No, I worked under security for 14 years. There is a national security aspect here. If we figured out how these things work or how to detect them in new ways or anything like that, should we put that out in the open? You can't tell your friends without telling your enemies. And, I hate to sound paranoid, but there are enemies out there. If there aren't, why is the United States spending $623 billion this year on things military? There's got to be somebody out there that you're worrying about giving you a hard time. Look at the airports these days. Somebody out there doesn't like us.
So true.
I think that's a fair statement anyway.
I think, but they keep those folks, and they're all well-intentioned. They're pushing for disclosure, but I just don't see it happening. There's a reason why presidents get into office and they're gung-ho about things, and they change their mind when they get in. They
find out something they didn't know before.
Or something that scares the living daylights out of them.
Yeah, exactly. George, you remember the presidential debates last year, though the subject came up?
Yes.
And I thought that surprised me somewhat.
Yep.
With Dennis Kucinich, you mean?
Yeah.
That's right. And I think they also wanted to quiz Bill Richardson about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. He wrote the foreword to a UFO book. How dare he?
But I tell a lot of people when I'm speaking to clubs or book clubs or civic clubs, you mentioned Jimmy Carter, Stan. A lot of people don't realize that Jimmy Carter reported seeing UFOs. They don't realize that Ronald Reagan reported seeing UFOs.
Oh, yeah.
They don't realize that Dr. Edgar Mitchell, Gordon Cooper, some of the original astronauts have went on record saying UFOs are real, that they've even seen UFOs. And they're surprised.
Well, Edgar Mitchell, remember, wrote the foreword for my book, Flying Saucers in Science. He's not shy about saying he thinks some of these things are really...
Well, and he has said, Stan, that some high-level people, his friends, have told him, this is real stuff. He doesn't have any reason to lie to us.
No, hardly. The sixth man to walk on the moon doesn't have...
I was in Washington, D.C. with him last year, sitting right next to him at a banquet. And I said, come on, Edgar, tell me. And, he's the same on the show as he was when he wrote his foreword for you. And, he sticks to it. I mean, he says these are real, we're being visited, and he won't back down on it.
Remember, he lived in Roswell.
That's right. Absolutely. And kind of hinted he wanted to go back up in the shuttle. He wanted to be the oldest astronaut ever.
Well, yeah. I mean, he's in competition with
John Glenn. Right?
John Glenn, and so he's made a comment about that. He's waiting long enough. Remember now, Edgar's even older than I am. Not much.
I want to get both your theories. You first, Kyle. What do you this visitation, let's assume it is happening. Right. You both believe it. It's been your avocation for years. What is happening? Why are we being visited? Why are we being watched? Beyond the abduction phenomenon, why are they coming here?
Well, just like our scientists, why do they go down into the ocean and to look for new species, or go into the jungle and study, the gorillas or whatever? What's to say they're not coming here and they've been looking at us? They're sort of anthropologists. And I think this goes way back. I think Eric Van Doniken's theory is probably there's something to that. I think they've been coming around for a long time, and they're coming back every so often to see how we're progressing and to see, like you mentioned, some of the changes we've had. We don't use an encyclopedia anymore. We go to the Internet, and they keep an eye on us, and I think they continue to do.
What's your take, Stan?
Well, my view is a little different than that. I think they've been coming for a very long time, and I think maybe they do look at us as, I'll call it specimens, like the apes in the jungle. But there's an article on my website about the UFO why questions, and there's a whole chapter in Flying Saucers and Science, and one of the why questions, of course, is, what the heck are they doing here? And I give a number of reasons for coming here. I think you're 22 last time I checked, but this is the honeymoon capital of this corner of the galaxy, George. Gas, food, lodging, next exit, for a wild ride.
Fast food, whatever you want, right?
Yeah, I think your view of what they're doing here depends a little bit on your view of what kind of a local galactic neighborhood do we live in. And I think it's been populated for a very long time. Remember, the Earth is over 4 billion years old. Recorded history is a few thousand years. There's a lot we don't know about the history of the neighborhood, but I think I make one assumption about every advanced civilization. It's concerned about its own survival and security. It seems to me everybody is. Everybody we know is, certainly. That being the case, you have to keep tabs on the primitives in the neighborhood, but only close tabs on those primitives who show signs of being able to bother you.
Yeah.
At the end of World War II, there were 3 signs. And remember, I'm old enough to remember World War II. There were 3 signs that soon these idiot Earthlings, whose major activity is obviously tribal warfare. I mean, remember, we Earthlings killed 50 million of our own kind. We destroyed 1,700 cities. These are hardly nice guys, The 3 signs were nuclear weapons, of course, and V-2 rockets, and radar as an indication of a budding electronics development, if you will. There was no radar before.
Which they'd be able to sense, I guess, with their technology, right?
Yeah. Whoops, these guys,
Who are these? Yeah, where'd they get all this stuff, right?
And all of a sudden we make it to the moon in the late 60s, and they're saying, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and so I think, you hear this nonsense, you can't get here from there. I would point out that every civilization in the neighborhood is going to know about nuclear fusion. And how can I be so sure? Because that's what makes the stars work.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody is going to try to figure out, hey, where's all that energy coming up there? Now, if you go back to, say, 1905, people would say, oh, it's a mass of burning gas. That's what the sun is. Sorry, folks. It's nuclear fusion, which we didn't figure out until 1938. And I hate to say it, but what did we do with it the first time around when we learned how to use it? We built an H-bomb. 3 mile wide fireball, 1952, as a matter of fact. Can you imagine a 3 mile wide fireball? I mean, the equivalent energy of 10 million tons of TNT. Scares the heck out of me just to talk about it.
Well, and so you can only imagine what they think.
Well, judge us by our actions. We did kill a few 100,000 people with a couple of nuclear weapons, and we've got much, much, much bigger weapons now than we did back then. The Russian set one off, incidentally, was 57 megatons, 57 million tons of TNT at one time.
Maybe they're trying to make these hybrids less warring. What do you think?
Well, yes. There must be one of these guys that has a piece.
Genetics,
yeah.
Let's get his DNA. This is one of the good guys, the only one or something. Yeah.
So I think, but remember, there's another more pragmatic thing. When you look back about large movements of people, in 1849, everybody went west, young man, go west. Why? Because there's gold in them.
Yeah.
You might have noticed that. And then Alaska and Australia and the Earth, and people get a little upset at me, but the Earth is the densest planet in the solar system.
Let's explain what you mean by that when we come back. Stanton Friedman, our special guest, along with Kyle Laverne. I'm George Noory, back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM.
To access the audio archives of Coast to Coast AM, log on to coasttocoastam.com.
What he's talking about. Saturdays at 11, the place to be is 1110 KFAB.
Jim Maxwell here, inviting you to join me Saturday mornings, 6 to 8, News Radio 1110 KFAB. If it's news, we'll talk about it. Good shit now. You like cold.
Hello, loneliness. I think I'm gonna cry. Bye-bye, love. Bye-bye, sweet caress. I feel like I could die. Bye-bye, my love, goodbye. There goes my baby with someone new. She sure looks happy, I sure am blue. She was my baby till he stepped in. Goodbye from romance, that might have been.
You're listening to Coast AM with George Noory.
Final hour of the program tonight, we're going to be talking with Michael Horn about the asteroid Apophis. Will it hit us? Michael does some work into the Billy Meyer case, and Billy thinks it will, so we'll talk with him about that. And the next hour, we'll take phone calls regarding special UFO cases. And when we come right back in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM, we'll continue talking with Kyle and Stanton about UFO cases, Appalachian case study, UFO sightings, alien encounters, and unexplained phenomena. When Stanton was talking a few moments ago about everybody rushing out to the West Coast in the early times to look for gold, well, he wasn't kidding. That's absolutely true. And now, Peter Croft, who's a contributing editor of Money Morning, believes that gold could go to $5,000 an ounce, and he cites 5 reasons. He says inflation, worldwide investment demand is exploding. He said since the second quarter of 2009, central banks have become big buyers of gold, not sellers. He said there's a currency crisis looming, and he says we have yet to reach a stage, a mania stage, as he calls it. So what do you do about gold investing? Well, you might want to call Lear Capital at 1-800-474-4259 and get this, a $50 certificate, and also learn why experts say that the gold price could double again. This certificate is good off any purchase of $1,000 or more of gold, and you'll also get the free gold investor kit with free shipping with this certificate. So call 1-800-474-4259, 1-800-474-4259.
Did you know that last year, smoking-related diseases killed 1 in 10 adults globally, and nearly 500,000 people in the United States alone? How many times have you tried to quit smoking, only to pick it back up again? How would you like to try an electronic smoking device for free that looks and tastes just like the real thing? Introducing Smoke Assist. Smoke Assist is a revolutionary electronic smoking device that really satisfies. No tobacco, no smell, no tar, no stained teeth, no smelly clothes, and no more guilt. Live a healthy lifestyle for you and your loved ones. Now you can get the electronic smoking device, a $130 value for free. Improve your life today and be healthy. I'm so confident that Smoke Assist will work for you that I'm going to give it to you for free. I know once you've tried it, you'll swear by it.
Get Smoke Assist right now for free. Call 800-853-7357. Get one for you or a friend. 800-853-7357. Special free offer with purchase of filters. So call now. That's 800-853-7357.
Your home for Fox News, 1110 KFAB.
Stan, what continues driving you into the UFO field? What fascinates you about all this?
Well, I can't think of a bigger question as to where do we fit in the scheme of things, and why is the government doing the strange things it's doing. It's a mystery that I want to solve. I've been to 20 archives, George, and I talk about this in Top Secret Magic, MAJIC, about the Majestic 12 documents, of which I think 4 are genuine and over 100 are phony.
Well, but all you need is those 4, Stan.
That's right. That's the point. And that's why I was saying about going west, young man, and the Earth is peculiar. People don't seem to realize that planets differ in their composition in our own solar system. If you had a big enough bucket of water, you could float Saturn in it. Its density is less than that of water. In other words, pounds per cubic foot, grams per cubic centimeter. The Earth has a density over 5.5 times that of water, which is bigger than any of the other planets. And what does that mean? It means that there's heavy metals here. And some of these new exoplanets, for example, have been found that have a density 1/6 that of water. Ain't much there, I'll tell you that. And the thing about heavy metals is they have very special properties, and there's a huge range. Remember, when I was a kid, at least, you used to talk about heavy as lead, light as balsa wood. You know, those were the two extremes. Well, gold that you mentioned has a density of about 18.9 times that of water. Lead is only 11 times that of water. So gold is almost twice as heavy as lead.
Right.
Think about that for a minute. Now, other interesting, very dense metals include uranium, which is just about the same as gold. And 100 years ago, George, you know what they were using uranium for? As a glaze, yellow glaze on table pottery.
Oh.
That's illegal now. You can't do that.
Yeah, they don't want to waste uranium anymore, do they?
No, but we have found some other uses for it. And there are things like tungsten, which is up there in the density, and osmium and rhenium, things other people have never heard of. The kicker here is really old stars have less heavy metals because to get up on the periodic table, to get things with lots of neutrons and protons and so forth, you got to cook them a bit in supernova. In other words, originally the universe was hydrogen and helium, these very light gases. And then gradually you do a little cooking, you have a supernova explosion, and you go to another generation. I mean, we got 13 billion years to play with, so there's plenty of time to do these things. Anyway, the older systems have lower levels of heavy metals. Earth is only 4 point something or other billion years old. So we have more of these goodies, if you will. So what I'm suggesting is aliens could have been mining the good stuff here for ages.
Well, because, Zecharia Sitchin's theory of the Anunnaki coming down to take gold. So I think all that's possible.
Well, the thing is, there are also things called rare earths. They are fairly rare. There's a whole bunch of these things, dysprosium and neodymium and stuff most people have never heard of. But in today's modern world, almost all the electronics use rare earths. And incidentally, China has cornered the world market. It's about 20 pounds of rare earth per Prius for the electrical stuff,
sure.
And so they may have been stealing rare earths from here for a long time. Who would miss it? Who would care? What are you going to do with that garbage? Would be the attitude. And, I worked in the nuclear world. The nuclear navy is dependent upon an element called zirconium. Who ever had anything to do with zirconium? We had to develop a whole new metalworking technology to build things out of zirconium, which has great nuclear properties and good strength at high temperatures, etc., corrosion resistance, all those good things. And that's just within the last 60 years. So what I'm suggesting is that there are a lot of guys out there, I say guys in quotes, because, guys, gals, aliens, whatever, who may be doing all kinds of stuff and may have been using our planet. Remember, we only had about 1 billion people back 110 years ago or so. Now we got 6.7 billion, and
it's growing.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah, and it's growing.
And more of them are starving too. I better add. But what I'm suggesting here is that aliens have a purpose to their activities. That they probably have rules about quarantining their own societies, so that they're quarantining us, so we don't bother them. I mean, if you stood back and looked at this planet, you see there are a lot of beautiful places, a lot of nice people, and all that sort of thing. But then you see that $620-some billion a year on things military in the United States, the rest of the world another $400 billion. How many people are starving every day, George?
Too many.
You see my point. If you stand back and look at what happens on this planet, it's not a great picture. So if you were an alien, would you want us out there? I don't think so. Would you trust us? I mean, I would have trouble imagining why anybody out there would trust Earthlings. In the first place, we don't have a leader to be taken to. You know all those jokes about why don't they land on the White House lawn and say, take me to your leader. I realize that President Obama might be upset by it, but I don't think the President of the United States speaks for 6.7 billion Earthlings. Not the last time I checked, anyway.
No, he doesn't.
And who's selling the most cars these days? It's China, last time I heard. First time that's happened, but it's not going to be the last time it happens either. What I'm saying is I think we need to stand back and look at this from a bigger picture viewpoint. And I hate to say it, but flying saucers finished the job that old Nicolaus Copernicus started. And no, I wasn't around when Copernicus was around in 1543. But he had the gall to say that the Earth wasn't the center of the universe, George. Can you believe that? I think there's still some people who think we are.
Some people think we're only 6,000 years old, Stan.
That's right. That's right. I suppose Pat Robertson might be one of those. I couldn't believe his comments about Haiti. But anyway.
Yeah, that was nuts.
Crazy thing. But what I'm saying is we need a better picture of where we fit. Copernicus said, hey, the center of the universe is the sun. The book was banned for 300 years, George. The church didn't like that. Now, at least the Pope is on record as saying, well, there could be other guys out there. That's no problem. God made them like he made us.
Does that, do you find that to be strange that the Vatican seems to be leaking approval?
My first thought when I heard about both the Vatican astronomer, they do have several observatories around, and then followed up by the Pope was, what does he know that we don't know?
That's exactly what I thought.
And, my thought is maybe he's getting the world's 1 billion or 2 billion Catholics ready to say, hey, these things could be real, it's okay, rather than saying, I've had people say to me, Stan, how can you believe in these things when it doesn't say anything in the Bible about them? And I say, read the book, The Bible and Flying Saucers by Dr. Barry Downing, and you may just change your mind.
And Kyle, do you get similar kinds of stories from people all around that region that we've talked about, West Virginia, Kentucky, Virginia, abduction cases and things like that?
Yeah, I do. And, I get cases with multiple witnesses, which I think are good. It's not just one or two guys that are on the fishing. Well, one example here that I was just looking at while I was listening to you guys, it was some mountaintop coal miners. You were mentioning minerals, but there was like 40 of them working one night. I don't know if you're familiar with mountaintop removal, but they're up literally on top of a mountain doing contour mining. They strip mining is what they used to call it.
Well, basically they bring the mountain down, right?
Yeah, bring it down from the top to get to the mineral, to the coal.
Yeah.
But I was talking to Lloyd Mills. He was the supervisor of the project, and there was 40 guys working on his shift, and this was only in 1987, September of 87, and they saw this light come right up between the two mountains because they had miners on each side of the mountain, and it was like coming up the valley. And where they're higher up, of course, they were eye level with these they looked like two lights, and then he said that they turned into several lights, and it did all kinds of things. It jumped around, it shined some lights down on some of the workers. I mean, again, you had multiple witnesses, but they were a lot more afraid to report it, or they didn't want to talk about it because people would make fun of them. In fact, it got out a little bit, and of course, several of them said, oh, it didn't happen, but it did happen. And then Lloyd now, after a few years, has went on record and talked about it in my book on what they saw. Another case was his cousin. That's how I got to find out about Lloyd's sighting. But he had a cousin, her name is Thelma Jackson, and they were originally from here in southern West Virginia, but they'd moved to Michigan in the 60s. Like a lot of people, they migrated up there to work in the automotive industry.
Sure.
Stan was just talking about the cars. Ford's not what it used to be. But
none of them.
Exactly. She was talking about, it's a real sad story. Her family still lives with a tragedy. Her son went outside to play in the snow. It was the big blizzard, the storm of the century in 1993, really early spring in March. And he was out in the backyard playing with his friend, a neighbor. And he came inside and was all excited, but he was scared. And he told his mom, he said, do you think I'm going to get radiation poisoning? She said, what are you talking about, Nathan? And she said, well, this big light came over top of us, and it beamed a light down on top of us out there while we were playing in the snow. And less than a year later, the kid dies of a brain tumor.
Gee.
I know. And they're always saying there's no evidence, but, going back to the Braxton County sighting back in 52, all those boys and Kathleen May that went up to see, up on the mountain to see where that UFO landed, they were all sick. They had nausea. They were throwing up, the next day. Physical evidence. There's also evidence on the ground. It was shooting out of mist. There were some fragments. And so, many times there's cases where something lands, it leaves like a crop circle. Nothing grows back.
Reminds me of the Cash Landrum case in Texas.
Exactly.
Doesn't it?
Which I think Stan has some of the dirt from that, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I've had samples of dirt, not from Cash Landrum.
Okay, but I knew you had some, yeah.
Del Post, Kansas. Ted Phillips is the guy, and over the last 40 years, Ted has collected roughly 3,900, 4,000 physical trace cases from 90 countries. And And, after you read a few hundred, it's the same thing going on all over the world. People see an object on or near the ground, it leaves, one finds physical changes. I had lab tests done from Delphos, Kansas, small town. I should check and see what its current population is. It was 499 back then in the 70s. But, so, yeah, you get cases like that. You can't throw them out. I mean, the lab tests tell you something strange happened, and we checked the soil that wouldn't grow anything for a few years at a much higher level of soluble minerals. It was too salty to grow anything, to look at it in a pragmatic kind of way. And there was no way that farmer could influence the soil down 14 inches in the ring so that it wouldn't absorb moisture, it wouldn't grow anything. I mean, none of us have, that big a microwave around to cook the ground. Right. And, yeah, it's an exciting time. Yeah, that Nathan story got to me, incidentally, and you wonder what all went on and how many other cases there have been like that. Probably inadvertent. I mean, nobody's saying the saucer came over and was trying to zap this poor kid.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't.
It just happened. No, it was like Cash Landrum. I don't think, they had radiation poisoning, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
And again, it wasn't there. It's like, I remember one of my first discussions with J. Allen Hynek was he had made a remark somewhere that why would aliens come here just to stop cars? Because there were many reports of cars being stopped and then starting again. You've got some in your books.
Right.
And my comment is nobody's saying they came here for that purpose. When people were driving automobiles back around the turn of the 19th to the 20th century, they scared the heck out of a lot of horses. But they weren't driving the car for the purpose of, let's see how many horses we can scare. We're trying to move us from point A to point B. So inadvertent things happening, what are you going to say? In the wrong place at the wrong time, wrong person? That's the way life is.
Kyle, how are you perceived out there?
I think I'm sort of like, I compare myself to the Richard Dreyfuss character in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I'm one of these common guys.
You make mountains with mashed potatoes?
Yeah, exactly. No, but it's like I need to know that this is true. I feel that it's true. I want to know. I want to be close enough to see a large spaceship land and see aliens. It's just like it's something that's driving me. And but I'm sure there's people that talk behind my back. That probably there's a few out there that are naysayers or that make fun. But most people that talk to me are really happy that I'm doing this kind of work, and they're real supportive.
Did you ever have anybody, while you were interviewing them, Kyle, break down emotionally?
Yeah, they maybe tears in their eyes,
Yeah.
Especially the Jackson lady with her son, Of course, that was, again, just a real sad story.
How about you, Stan?
Well, yeah, Alan Hynek used to talk about it. His book is The UFO Experience, because even if you're talking to somebody 20 years after an event took place, it is still so real to them.
Yeah.
You can just see the emotional content as they relive what was an incredible experience. And so, yeah, I get people telling me how pleased they are to be able to talk to me because I couldn't talk to anybody else. They know I'm not going to laugh. When you give a lecture, flying saucers are underlined, capitalized, real exclamation point, and that's what my lecture is. They know I'm not going to laugh at them, and this fear of ridicule. I hadn't realized growing up that was one of the important aspects of everybody's life. We do anything to keep people from laughing at us. And they're so relieved when they realize, oh, it's okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's human nature for people to feel that way. But like you said, when they see something, it stays with them for years. It's like they saw it yesterday. And they all have such vivid memories, and they never forget it.
Well, what's next for you, Kyle?
Well, as I say, hardly a day goes by that people don't stop me somewhere or send me an email or something, a letter through in care of my publisher with other stories. And so I'm collecting more stories and going to continue to investigate and report these stories and come out with another book. I'm not getting
Volume 3.
Exactly, Volume 3, but only because I want to get these stories out, and they're good stories, and they've never been told before in most cases. And they're pretty interesting. And
where do you get these volumes right now, if you want to pick them up?
They can go to my website, KyleOverandUFOs.com, or go to WoodlandPress.com, which is the publisher.
You're on Amazon, too.
Yeah, on Amazon, too.
All right, very good. Well, stick around. We're going to have some phone calls when we come back on Coast to Coast AM. And then, as I mentioned in our final hour, we're going to talk about the asteroid Apophis. It is supposed to get close in 2029, and then real close in 2036. Maybe too close. I'm George Noory. This is Coast to Coast AM. Don't touch your dial. We'll be right back.
Enjoy all the very best of Coast on the go. Now on your iPhone. Download the app directly from the App Store or visit coasttocoastam.com to learn how.
Sound mind and body that I, James Fredericks III,
cover all the news. 1110 KFAB. With George Noory, call the wildcard line at area code 818-501-4109. The first-time caller line is area code 818-501-4721. To talk to George toll-free from east of the Rockies, call 1-800-825-5033. West of the Rockies, toll-free at 1-800-618-8255. International callers may reach George Noory by calling your in-country Sprint access number, pressing option 5, and dialing toll-free 800-893-0903. From the City of Angels, this is Coast to Coast AM with George Noory.
Well, Stanton Friedman's going to stick around and take your questions and comment on some of your stories as we talk about UFOs. Kyle's great work, Appalachian Case Study, UFO Sightings, Alien Encounters, and Unexplained Phenomena, available, as he mentioned, from Woodlawn Press, and also his own website, which is linked up at coasttocoastam.com. If you would like a radio built for excellent AM reception and good audio clarity, then you might want to give C-Crane CC Radio 2 a try. In addition to getting good reception, the CC Radio 2 can also be your emergency radio and give you the information that you need in a crisis with the NOAA weather band and the 2-meter ham band. The new CC Radio 2 has the patented twin-coil ferrite antenna. It's built right in there for improved AM reception. The 2-meter ham band to keep you informed during a local disaster or a hurricane. And I bet those hams are working overnight in Haiti right now. The weather band and weather alert to keep you updated on your local emergencies as well. If you need a good AM radio that will help bring in your favorite station with better clarity, then call C. Crane at 1-800-522-8863. Now, the CC Radio 2 is only $159.95. Here's that number again, 1-800-522-8863. You can also visit them online at ccradio.com.
When did your life stop being fun? When did you start giving in to your anxiety, your worry, your fear and depression? At what time did you stop being able to snap out of it? If being happy seems like something you'll never feel again, it doesn't have to feel that way. I'm Lucinda Bassett, founder of the Midwest Center for Stress and Anxiety. I suffered for over 20 years with anxiety, depression, and panic attacks until I took control of my life. That's why I founded the Midwest Center, so people like us could have somewhere to turn to find help. And to help you even more, I'm giving away my powerful free CD to everyone who calls in. You deserve to be happy, and there really is something you can do to help yourself, starting right now. Please call for your free CD. Call now.
Please call right now, and we will send you a powerful, life-changing CD absolutely free. Call 800-211-0128. That's 800-211-0128. Call 800-211-0128 now.
Your home for Fox News, 1110 KFAB.
Stan, when you put together Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience, anything shocking there that, as you were doing your work and research? I mean, you've known this case for years, but anything pop up at you?
Well, yeah, the biggest thing was Kathleen's comparative analysis. Nobody had ever done this before. One of the objections on the part of the nasty, noisy negativists, as I politely call her, is that, well, Betty had these dreams, and all that came out in that story was just she wrote up her dreams. Barney must have heard about them 100 times. He echoed those, and so forth and so on. Well, it turns out it's nonsense. What Kathleen did was compare their testimony under hypnosis when they were together. In other words, did it match? Did they both see the same thing? And interestingly enough, it did. But if you compared their testimony under hypnosis with Betty's dreams, the dreams are different from what they each recalled under hypnosis. That's never been done before, and it puts to rest the cockamamie explanation that it was just a dream. And there were people writing that Betty was talking about those dreams all the times, and Barney must have heard about it 100 times. She wrote up her dreams, put it in she told Barney about them one time, put them in a drawer, and that was the end of that. He wasn't interested in flying saucers. This is before the hypnosis stuff. So we have those to compare with what came out. And so that had never been done. Also, one of the new things was more detailed descriptions of what they saw. For example, and I was up doing a television special with Kathleen up in the area where this happened, and we drove by where it used to be the Man in the Mountain there. It was a symbol for New Hampshire kind of thing, and collapsed and fell into a lake. What are you going to do? But the detailed description of the fact that they described it as about the object they were watching, which the noisy negativists will say was just a light in the sky. And it's been explained as Jupiter. Pretty good for it to fly alongside where the Man in the Mountain was anyway. It was 1.5 times the size of the Man in the Mountain, which we know the height of that, which was over 50 feet. And so, we're not talking about a light in the sky. So there were things like that, the details that came through. And also I think a lot of people will be surprised at the Blue Book file, which they changed what they said it was. Originally at one point they did say radar and visual and stuff, and then that's kind of erased from the next version of the story.
All right, let's take some calls, Stan. You ready?
Okay.
Here we go. We'll go to Jack in Derry, New Hampshire, first-time caller. Hi, Jack. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, George, and hello, Stanton.
Hi.
Hi. I wanted to address something that Kyle Lovin had mentioned earlier in the show concerning that well-known case of Thomas Mantell, the Air National Guard pilot, who was one of the first pilots to actually die in an alleged UFO chase. My understanding is that Project Sign had determined a long time ago that that they weren't sure what he was chasing. They backed off on saying it was Venus.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Yeah, and then decided they didn't know. But I can tell you for sure the man, he actually had flown so high that I think it was 25,000 feet that he had oxygen deprivation, and he blacked out. There was no doubt about that. But then it turned out, from what I understand, that Dr. Hynek, who was a consultant to Project Sign, had actually knew that it was probably one of these the balloons, a Skyhook, the Office of Naval Research Skyhook balloon, but he couldn't say anything because it was a secret mission, and so
we're still arguing about Skyhook. There are two different places from which they were launched. One was up in Minnesota, and there was a launch which some people say seems to match the orbit. And you're right, it was kind of classified, although it was not, as claimed by Bill Nye, the science guy whose purpose is to deny, originally set up as a spy balloon. It was set up to lift large payloads near the top of the atmosphere. That's not easy to do when you think about it, go back in time to that time frame. And I mention this because there's a lot of confusion about balloons. When you hear the mogul balloon explanation for Roswell, you will have people on television showing pictures of a Skyhook-type balloon, this huge polyethylene thing. I mean, it is big. Well, the mogul balloon was a balloon train. There were 20 to 25 standard, conventional, normal weather balloons. You used to be able to buy them in the surplus stores, maybe 6 foot when expanded, with helium and stuff. It was neoprene, which is not transparent. Polyethylene is, and entirely different things. So the Skyhooks were early polyethylene balloons, and yes, they were not well known, and there's still some questions because he was Mantell was an experienced pilot, and you're right, he supposedly didn't have oxygen, so if you get up over 20,000 feet, you can't go very long with oxygen deprivation. So, Kyle left some of that out of the story, but it was a mystery. And, you'll find things that say his body was all disintegrated when they found it on the ground. That's not true either. What can I say? It's a mystery. It got a lot of publicity over the years. It doesn't add much to our picture of what the heck's going on with flying saucers.
What do you think of the Lonnie Zamora case? He just passed away, by the way, in November.
Yeah, he did. I've been at that exact location in Socorro, New Mexico, and the recent explanation that it was just a hoax perpetrated by some students who were trying to get back at Lonnie because there were disagreements. New Mexico Institute is there. I think that explanation is total baloney. I think it was a very good case, and what's interesting is even the Air Force still lists it as an unknown. And once when I was speaking in Las Vegas to the American Nuclear Society chapter out there, a woman came up to me afterward and said she was a grad student at the New Mexico Institute, and she was asked to look at some soil that had been picked up out there, and it had some strange aspects to it. And the Air Force told her to shut up, basically.
Really?
Yeah, and I passed this on to Dr. James E. McDonald, who I feel was the best ufologist ever. And he followed up on it, and indeed, he talked to her. I mean, he's out in Arizona, and I'm back here in New Brunswick. It's a lot easier for him to go check on her. And it was not a student hoax, and the president of the institute wrote a letter in which he said he'd heard that it was a hoax, but this is like third hand already, and remember that Hynek was down there, the Air Force was there. The first explanation that some people came up with was it was a lunar excursion module test but that doesn't jibe either. And the fact that it moved off at very high speed, parallel to the ground, a hoax balloon, big enough to carry the two guys, beings, creatures, whatever you want to call them, that were observed alongside this thing by Lonnie Zamora. Everybody who knew Lonnie in the town, remember it's a small town, Socorro. If you're some kind of a nut, people are going to find out about it in a small town.
No doubt about that.
You know, so I think it was an excellent case. It's still listed as an unknown, and the characteristics don't match that when you start looking at how big a balloon you'd have to pick up two guys and move off at high speed parallel to the ground. You know, it just doesn't fit. And if it doesn't fit, you must say, hey, that explanation doesn't work.
All right, thanks, Dan. Let's go to Laytonville, California, west of the Rockies. Darren, go ahead.
Hey, George.
Hi.
Little joke there, remember that guy?
Yeah.
Hey, I've got two things. Years ago, there was a guy named Morton Downey Jr. Remember him?
Sure do.
Well, he claimed that he was abducted, and they did his teeth for him.
I hadn't heard that.
So
no, you're serious. That's true.
I'm very serious.
Yeah.
He did an interview prior to him dying and said that he had real bad teeth, and then they abducted him and they fixed his teeth, and he had quite a few encounters with them.
Do you remember that, Stan, at all? He was a talk show host in his own right.
No, I remember that, but I don't remember about the teeth repair, although there are a number of cases in which apparently there was, let's say, a medical repair job. How's that? Now, why and whether these guys are just showing off or they watched one too many Star Trek with bones, you know, I don't know. But certainly one would expect that an advanced civilization would have advanced medical techniques, wouldn't they? I mean, look at MRIs and stuff today. If I'd talked about those 60 years ago, you'd say, what are you talking about? You're crazy. You can't look inside the body and find out what's going on the way these things do. When I was growing up, people used the term exploratory surgery a great deal. You know, you cut somebody up to try to figure out what was going on, because just with x-rays you weren't finding out what was going on inside. Now we have loads of non-invasive techniques, which you practically never hear about exploratory surgery, because we have sophisticated techniques for determining what's going on inside the body without cutting you open. And so I don't know what they did with him. Gee, maybe it would save on my dental bills, huh? Hey, guys. Come on and get me.
Somebody look in on that.
What?
That's my second question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, Einstein, did he believe that the past, present, future all existed at the same time? And if so, couldn't that make it possible that it's us visiting ourselves from the future?
People have been arguing about that for a long time, and I don't get into questions about time travel. Some say, well, you can go forward but not backward. Others say if you warp space and time, you can do both because you circle around and come back. You know, I try to deal with the real world as it is, and I know my mathematical skills are not up to digging into that. And also, what I've found over the years is that calculations can be very impressive, 11-dimensional spaces and stuff. Very sophisticated mathematics because of the fancy computers we can use and stuff. That doesn't mean they're describing the real world. It's kind of like the discussion about German flying saucers. People show you drawings and sketches and so forth. I worked for companies where we'd put together a proposal. There'd be beautiful artwork. The thing that was shown in the drawings had never been built. It's an artist's concept. So there's a long way, in other words, between a fourth-dimensional or eighth-dimensional space-time warping and the real world. So I keep my nose out of that stuff because I don't know anything about it, but I am very skeptical when you don't have the experimental verification of the beautiful theory.
Okay, thank you so much. Next up, let's go to Shiloh, Illinois. Hey, Jim, welcome to the show again.
Hey,
Hey, how's it going there, George?
Okay, James.
Stanton, you know what, George and Stanton, I've noticed, I got a comment and a question. When I watch these shows on UFOs and stuff, there's only 2% that are decent. The rest are debunking shows. They start off sounding like, they're trying to get you to believe in UFOs. And then when they start describing the crafts and stuff, they always throw tinfoil out there. And that is a dead giveaway that it's a debunking UFO show trying to get you into thinking that everybody's crazy. Because they won't spend a dime trying to make it look like a real UFO crash. They want it to look as fake as they can. But I saw a UFO with a friend of mine over, I guess it was about 160 miles outside of Fort Leonard Wood 30 years ago, and we were threatened by the military not to talk about it. My friend actually disappeared. His dad was a full-bird colonel. I had found out later on. But UFO we saw was a cigar shape with very elongated rectangular lights on each side, totally unlike any jet or plane. It emitted some kind of glowing gas that sprayed off of it, and we were glad it wasn't directly under us because we thought, it's probably poisonous, radioactive, or whatnot. And anyway, that UFO was really spooky because it was jacking back and forth like a typewriter somebody making mistakes on the typewriter. It was very, very alarming looking, I got scared, but I started getting excited and calling it over with my hands. And finally, it seemed like noticed us, and it shut its little lights off, put a spotlight on, and stopped on a dime. Then it started moving again and drifting because I had stopped calling it over. I got scared. And then I decided, what the heck, call it over one more time. I did. It stopped again, put that light on, and I jumped out of a 35-foot treehouse with my friend. We ran, and later that night, about 10 minutes later, we stopped again to see if we could see it again, because after we got our guts up, then we saw another UFO. This apparently some kind of stealth craft. I guess the government has, kind of like a stealth bomber or something, but it was very soft-edged and kind of a pearl gray bottom, very glossy on the top, and you could feel it looked like shovel tile on the bottom, like it could go in space and whatnot. But I believe what they do is when these events take place, they also have their own little shadowy UFOs of their own, and they basically after that happened, the farm land that we had spotted it on was completely taken over by military. My friend went out there the next day, and anyway, long story short, he was threatened. He disappeared, never saw him again. Jeez. And anyway, I just want your opinion. I guess taking up too much time on the program. I'll listen off the air.
Good story, Jim. Go ahead, Stan.
There's a lot of strange stuff going on all over the place, and the government's role in all of this is mysterious because it seems to not always be the same. Sometimes threatening, sometimes we just assume you didn't and try to convince people, didn't talk about it, try to convince people it's a matter of national security and stuff, and people are patriotic, take advantage of that. Who knows? There seem to be many different models, but of course you can see that on a typical turnpike, let's say. Big ones, small ones, fast ones, slow ones. And the analogy I like to use on the big ones is nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, which are pretty big things. And it comes as a shock to people who realize that these things can operate for 18 years without refueling. Mm-hmm. That's pretty neat and pretty shocking. But the little airplanes they carry, which can go very much faster, can fly for, an hour, 2 hours, typically not more than that. So we have little ones and we have big ones, different function, and they look different. So I don't know what's going on. I think everybody in the neighborhood, a local galactic neighborhood, and let's face it, there are over 1,000 stars within 50 light years of here, so if even 10% have planets, that's a lot. And even if there's been colonization, they might have converted places that weren't originally with life systems. they converted those to places, terraforming it's called.
Well, we're going to come back with final phone calls with Stanton Friedman. Also get a pen and paper ready. He's going to give you a P.O. box in Holton, Maine, and you need to write this down. We'll be back.
The official website of Coast to Coast AM is www.coasttocoastam.com. Log on now.
On-time vaccination easy? Visit pkids.org. A message from parents of kids with infectious diseases.
I'm Matt Peralt, and I'll be here with the latest on Creighton basketball every day on the Good Morning Show. It's Matt Peralt on the Blue Jay Beat at 6:40 a.m. on News Radio 1110 KFAB.
Grace on the water, lips like sugar, lips like sugar. Just when you think you're cornered, she glides across the water. She calls for you tonight to share this new life. Flow down her lips, she laughs and
George Noory. Call the Wildcard line at 818-501-4109. The first-time caller line is 818-501-4721. To talk to George toll-free from east of the Rockies, call 1-800-825-5033. From west of the Rockies toll-free, call 1-800-618-8255. International callers may reach George Noory by calling their in-country Sprint access number, pressing option 5, and dialing toll-free 1-800-893-0903. From the City of Angels, this is Coast to Coast AM with George Noory.
Okay, as I mentioned, the next hour we're going to be talking about Apophis, a near-Earth asteroid, and what this all means to all of us. And when we come back, we'll take final phone calls with the father of modern-day ufology, Stanton Friedman. There are many questions that I talk about here on Coast to Coast. Will we need guns to keep our freedom? Will the dollar crash and wipe out our money? Will martial law shut down all transportation? Will I need global identification to buy and sell? What will 2012 bring? And will I be quarantined in a pandemic? Oh, yes. Will the global warming hoax shut down life as I know it? Any one of these problems will stop our ability to get food. Having your own savings account of food is the solution. eFoodsDirect.com on the Internet has long-term, storable, and immediately usable foods that are delicious, easy to prepare, and extremely economical, and I've tried them. There is no more peaceful feeling than to have a savings account of this food, which I consider the best food on the planet. You can ensure your life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness with a savings account of food on the web, eFoodsDirect.com, or call 800-409-5633. That's eFoodsDirect.com.
If you or someone you love suffers from memory problems, insomnia, or depression, maybe it's related to overall brain health. So visit neurosurgeon Russell Blaylock's website and find out what he has to say about these conditions, why they may happen, and if there are some answers. Get Dr. Blaylock's free book, Program for a Healthy Brain. Go to 1-800-SPECIAL.com or call 1-800-SPECIAL.
Do you have problems? Have you ever thought that you may have spiritual problems and dark energies affecting you or making you sick? More and more people are believing in this philosophy as they see their positive results. I'm Gary Spivey, psychic, medium, spiritual healer, and author of the new book, Spiritual Secrets from God. With my spiritual gifts, I can answer any question you may have, as well as help you rid yourself of any dark energies. To get a private session with me, call 1-800-827-GARY, 1-800-827-GARY, or log on to GarySpivey.com.
On air, online, on demand, KFAB.com.
Stanton, are most of your works still available?
Oh, yeah. Well, my books anyway, and the DVDs, and they're all listed at the website, www.stantonfriedman.com. We even have some combination deals, but I've only written 4 books. The new one, I see Amazon's taking orders for it already. It won't be out until June.
I love it. All right, how about that P.O. Box in Holton?
Okay. The Stanton Friedman, Post Office Box 958. That's Holton, Houlton, Maine, which is M-E, 04730-0958. If you send me a self-addressed stamped envelope, I'll send you a free list of books, or you can go to the website. But some people, not everybody likes PayPal, I've found out.
Well, and not everybody has computers, believe it or not.
Really, George? Yeah, I noticed that. So that's Post Office Box 958, Holton, Maine, 04730-0958. And I should mention that in DVD format, we have UFOs Are Real, an early winner in the UFO movie sweepstakes way back in '79.
A long time ago.
Yeah, but it's got Betty Hill, it's got Travis Walton, it's got a whole bunch of people, Dr. Bruce Maccabee, I'm in it. There are a total of, 4 PhDs, 3 lieutenant colonels, 2 abductees, and me. That rhymes somehow.
What did you think of Michael Shermer when you were on with him on the Larry King show? I was there with you too, but you two were really...
Well, I was aggravated because he was interrupting. He was playing with little alien dolls, which I thought wasn't much of a contribution.
Yeah.
And he didn't seem to know anything. And as you recall, when he and I debated on your show, he started off...
Which you won, by the way.
Yeah, only 80% to 20%. That's pretty good. But he started off with a typical example of the intellectual bankruptcy of the pseudoscience of anti-ufology. Love the way that sounds, George. When he said that, the reason you can't explain science, it's a residue effect. Like with all these paranormal subjects, there's maybe 5% that you can't explain because you don't have enough data. And, of course, I blasted him with the Blue Book Special Report 14, 21.5% unknowns, and several other studies. And it was downhill for him after that. And, frankly, George, I got a lot of email from people saying they couldn't understand why I didn't just punch him off his chair.
That's not you. You don't do that.
That's exactly what I said.
You ever been in a fight ever in your life? You in a fight?
No. You're talking physical.
Physical fight, yeah, not screaming at people.
No. No, I haven't. It really isn't my style, and it's probably because I was in high school debating. And you learn, we had a state championship debate team in Linden, New Jersey, way back in about 1950 or so. And you learn to keep your cool, because the best way to lose a debate is to not get, to get raveled, if you will, to become unraveled, whatever it is. And so, and one of the things I found when I was doing so much lecturing was that I could keep my cool because I learned from an experience with a 5th grade teacher who gave me a hard time about something I'd read in an encyclopedia. I brought in the encyclopedia, and she reluctantly agreed I was probably right. And I learned if you're going to take on authority figures, better get your facts in hand before putting your mouth in gear, or they're going to squash you. So I actually am very careful in what I say, George. Some people might disagree with you. I mean, you're saying these things are alien. Well, I am careful when I say that. And I deal with the objections in flying saucers and science. So no fights. And, it was different with Michael and with Seth. We had a more reasoned discussion, I guess. Sure. And I understand.
And you won that too, though.
Yeah, 57-33-10. I mean, who keeps track?
Yeah, all right, you're good. Let's take some final calls here.
Sure.
Let's go to Chad in Richmond, British Columbia. Go ahead, Chad. Thanks for holding.
No problem, George. It's good to talk to you, and greetings from the Great White North.
Absolutely.
Real quick, I just wanted to share something with you, and then I have a question. My grandfather, during the late 30s and into the mid-40s, he worked in White Sands, New Mexico with the Army, and he had the privilege of working with von Braun. And, when I was little, I was 8 years old, he used to look at me and had this knowing look in his eye, and he said, son, there are so many things that I want to tell you about, but you're just going to have to wait to see what happens later on. And he said there are some things that you probably won't live to see. And unfortunately, he passed away when I was 8, so I never really got to pick his brain anymore after that. But, I kind of always wondered what that was about. But anyway, my question was, I've always been curious about the Nome, Alaska cases in this recent movie that came out before Times. And I was just wondering, gentlemen, Stan, do y'all have any thoughts on that? Because I really didn't know that much about it, and I was always wondering why. I mean...
Well, it's fiction. As a matter of fact, the producers of that movie paid the city of Nome, which was being made to look pretty damn silly, frankly, $20,000 for damage to their reputation. And that doctor, so-called, doesn't exist. It was all fiction, trying to pass it off as, well, this is really a true story, but we've changed a few things. Well, it isn't, and it wasn't, and it was... I mean, I know it'll shock people to think that maybe the entertainment media sometimes go beyond the bounds of propriety. I'm sure that's a shock to everybody, but no, it's a phony story. Sorry about that.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Chad. Next up, we go to Rochester, New York, east of the Rockies. David, go ahead.
Hi, good morning.
Hey.
I'm concerned about things that are real and that are simple. If you have a magnifying glass, you can focus light energy and set things on fire. You have a prism, you can disperse light into the rainbow, and it's possible to build a satellite that collects solar energy and converts it into microwaves. It gives you energy beams, and you can have energy on the Earth by having a receiving dish antenna, boil water, get electricity, get zero energy. And I don't hear too much about unlimited energy that could be harnessed and used. Pretty soon we're coming up to March 16th. That's the anniversary of Professor Goddard taking a blowtorch up in Auburn, Maine, and setting off the first rocket, and that can only want 60 miles an hour and 184 feet down range. That was the beginning of rocketry. Nobody knows about that. They know about the Wright brothers. When are we going to start harnessing energy or even building a space elevator, which is nothing more than having a cable spinning around like your keys on the end of a chain?
Well, they've talked about the elevator, Stanton, haven't they?
Well, let me talk about Goddard, too. I'm a great appreciator of Goddard. Incidentally, he did most of his rocket launches after his neighbors got a little upset up in New England, and just outside Roswell, New Mexico. And he's discussed in my book, the one that hasn't been published yet, Science Was Wrong, because one of the chapters deals with space travel. And, the New York Times said in the early 20s, he doesn't seem to know what every schoolboy knows, that a rocket wouldn't work in a vacuum because there's nothing to push against. And it took them in 1969, when Apollo, the first Apollo to land on the moon, was on its way for the New York Times to admit that they had been mistaken, to correct this mistake that happened in like 1920. In 69, they finally admit they were wrong. So I'm a great admirer of Goddard. He was a professor of physics. He was not some dink down the road kind of thing. And the government finally gave his wife a nice chunk of money for using his patents as they had. And the funny thing was that the Germans, with the V2s, and stuff, had paid a lot of attention to Goddard, but not in the United States. He's one of these many cases where remember the British astronomer royals in 1956, 1 year before Sputnik, said space travel is utter bilge. And, that's one of these many pronouncements from on high from very well-educated people who didn't have the faintest notion of what they were talking about.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, about the free energy thing, again, we get back to the difference between theory and practice. Yes, sunlight is free, no question. The converters are not. And there has been quite a bit of discussion about putting up a satellite at a high orbit and having it collect sunlight and convert it to electricity and send it down to the ground. And it's possible to do that, but the question is whether it's economically reasonable to do that. And that's an entirely different question. Economics and reality sometimes collide. It's just like in Europe right now, they're paying people extra money for solar and wind power, and they're finding the cost is a heck of a lot higher than for the kind of energy production that it's replacing. There's a chapter in the new book about global warming, so-called, and tell that to Europe today about global warming when they've had the worst winter they've had in 50 years. So, again, the real intrudes upon the theoretical.
Let's go next to Frank in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Go ahead, Frank.
Hi, George. How are you doing?
Good.
I was wondering, Stanton.
Yeah.
If do you feel possibly that aliens are coming here for religious reasons?
Well, whose religion, theirs or ours?
Theirs.
I don't know. I have never talked to an alien, and so I have no input as to what their religious concerns are. And people have said, well, maybe Jesus was an alien, and he was dumped off here to make things better for us. It didn't take the first time. Maybe they're doing it again. I mean, I can say Jesus was a nice Jewish boy who made good, but that doesn't answer the question. I don't know. I have no idea what their religion is, and when people ask me
do you think they have religion?
Well, how do you define religion? A system of beliefs that helps you live a better life? Or do you mean a bunch of rituals which either you abide by or you get killed? Religion covers an awful lot of ground.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know. It's as simple as that. I wish they'd tell me, but they don't talk to me, so I no answer for it.
Because it seems to me that at times it's never, I've been listening to Coast to Coast for many years, and it's never really discussed as far as, like you were, your two guests were discussing, the prior case where, someone was, hypnotized. Or anyone who's been abducted, if there's been any ritual or religious theme towards their abduction.
Not that I can think of, but of course people down here, Earthlings, sometimes put a religious spin on things. God made me do it. Or look at Pat Robertson with his crazy comment about Haiti. They made a pact with the devil, you see, and they've been paying for it ever since. That's from 1804 or so. And I think that doesn't reflect reality. But remember, there are people who say we are the only intelligent life in the universe. That world out there, that's the control of the devil. So that's putting a religious face on it. I don't buy that. For example, let's hope we're not the only intelligent life in the universe.
That's right.
If this is the best God can do, she isn't doing a very good job of it.
What will it take to get this UFO issue to the forefront?
I suppose it would take a Woodward and Bernstein. Two guys who really dig into the facts, have the backing of a major, in their case, the Washington Post, major newspaper. Maybe I can convince some guys in Hollywood to make a movie in which we go into Roswell and MJ-12 and really lay it all out there. It's a great idea. If that happened, it might have an impact. I think it's not going to be easy. And remember, there's been a whole host of phony baloney stuff that's been put out there, and there's an ego problem here. There are many people, Time Magazine, for example, the New York Times, Washington Post, who think they keep tabs on what's important in the world. If this were happening, if aliens were visiting Earth and the government was covering it up, that would be important. Nobody denies that. But if it were, they would know about it, and they don't, so it must not be. And anybody who says it is must be some kind of a nut, and I'm not going to waste my time finding out about this nutty stuff. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that's the biggest obstacle. On the one hand, the fear of ridicule by witnesses. On the second hand, the fear of what happens when you break state secrets, violating security oaths and stuff like that. And on the third, arrogance. And that's one of the themes of this science was wrong thing. It's the arrogance of people who think they can talk about something about which they know nothing because there isn't anything to be known, because they would know it if there was. And getting around that, I think there is another part of this. One thing that's happening now is the recognition that our perception of the galactic neighborhood was not right. It wasn't too many years ago people said there weren't any other planets out there. We haven't seen any. Well, now we got systems that can see them, and the number is growing, by leaps and bounds. And so suddenly it's become popular to say, well, gee, some of those planets out there might be suitable for life, huh? And somebody else is going to say, well, yeah, but that star is 1 billion years older than the sun, so that means they've had a lot more time to develop, and, that's not so unreasonable. In other words, there's been a big change in attitude.
Dramatic change, hasn't there?
Yeah, and you've been part of that, George, and I hope I have been. And
you sure have.
And so, I'm an optimist still. I got a lot of years to go yet. It says here, both my parents lived to be 89, so I've got a while. I'm only 75.
Well, you're coming up on, 4 o'clock in the morning in New Brunswick?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, actually, it's coming up on 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock, okay. 4-hour difference from where I am. So you get some sleep, Stan, and I want to thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure.
All the time. Stanton Friedman, the father of modern-day ufology, and his website, of course, linked up at coasttocoastam.com. I don't know why I have to say that all the time, because you already know that, but Webmaster Lex likes that when I do that. So their websites are linked up at coasttocoastam.com. When we come back next hour, we'll be talking with Michael Horn about the asteroid Apophis, the odds of it hitting the planet. What does he think? What does Billy Meyer think? Billy Meyer, who has had some incredible films and movies of UFOs from Switzerland. We'll talk with Michael Horn and take your calls later on in the hour on Coast to Coast AM.
doing it like fatherhood.gov.
Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
On air, online, on demand. KFAB.com.
Somewhere out there, this is Coast to Coast AM with George Noory.
Apophis is a near-Earth asteroid that caused a brief period of concern back in December of 2004 because initial observations indicated a small probability that it would strike the planet in 2029. Additional observations provided improved predictions that somehow eliminated the possibility of an impact on Earth or the Moon in 2029. However, a possibility remains that during the 2029 close encounter with Earth, Apophis will pass through a gravitational keyhole, a precise region in space no more than about 600 meters across. That would set up a future impact on April 13th, 2036. This possibility has got scientists somewhat baffled, somewhat alarmed. Up next, Michael Horn, who's the representative for Billy Meyer. That's next on Coast to Coast AM.
Thank you for seeing us, Doctor. Danny's been warm, and with all this talk about the flu...
H1N1 is a concern, and fever is one of the first symptoms. So let's get Danny's temperature first. A slight fever.
What kind of thermometer is that?
The Exergen Temporal Scanner Thermometer. Just a quick, gentle scan across the forehead gives you a fast, accurate reading. We're using it for all our patients and at the hospital.
Wow. I wish I had one of those at home to keep an eye on Danny's fever.
Home model available at Walmart and other fine retailers.
We don't get many second chances. This one could save your life. A TIA, or transient ischemic stroke, is a mini-stroke. Symptoms usually go away within 24 hours and you feel fine again. But if you don't get to a stroke center or hospital fast, you risk a full-fledged stroke that can change your life forever. Don't take that chance. Contact National Stroke Association at 1-800-STROKES or visit stroke.org and find out more about recognizing stroke symptoms fast. Do it now, while there's still time.
Thank you for seeing us, Doctor. Danny's been warm, and with all this talk about the flu...
H1N1 is a concern, and fever is one of the first symptoms. So let's get Danny's temperature first. A slight fever.
What kind of thermometer is that?
The Exergen Temporal Scanner Thermometer. Just a quick, gentle scan across the forehead gives you a fast, accurate reading. We're using it for all our patients and at the hospital.
Wow. I wish I had one of those at home to keep an eye on Danny's fever.
Home model available at Walmart and other fine retailers.
Want to know something cool about Geico and renter's insurance?
Do I?
Okay, well, let's say you buy some presents, but they get stolen.
Oh, mercy me.
Let me finish. Well, Geico can help with that, even if they're stolen from your car or right out of your hands.
My word.
Not done yet. And coverage is as little as $12 a month. You just kissed me.
I get excited.
Yeah, maybe a little.
For a fast, easy rate quote on renter's insurance, visit geico.com. 1110 KFAB. On air, online, on demand.
And welcome back to Coast this hour. Michael Horn is with us. We'll take phone calls at the half. Michael is the authorized American media representative for the Billy Meyer contacts. Billy, of course, is the farmer out there in Switzerland who has seen some incredible things out there. Michael has researched this since 1979. He's the writer-producer of the documentary, The Silent Revolution of Truth. We're here to talk about Apophis on Coast to Coast AM. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, George. Thanks for having me on again. I appreciate it.
This is an incredible story because even though they say, the scientists, that the odds of us getting hit by Apophis are getting higher, I'm not sure anymore. But you've looked at this through the eyes of Billy Meyer. Tell me about it.
Well, this is almost one of those things is where do you start? So I'll start kind of at the beginning of this whole new effort to get the information out. The Russians, we put out a press release just a couple of days ago, earlier this week, announcing and reiterating that the Russian space program, the chief of Russia's space program, recently invited NASA, the European Space Agency, the Chinese Space Agency, and others. They want to create an international project, an effort to deflect Apophis from its course. Now, this is a very interesting thing that they should suddenly come on and make an international announcement. And the part about it that may interest your listeners more than anything else is that this call exactly echoes what Billy Meyer was told in 1981, and that happens to be, as anybody can figure out, 23 years before this asteroid was discovered.
Interesting.
Yeah, and now people say, well, people always say that they predict things, and people always say that someone told them something, but there's never any proof. Well, I'll give you first the anecdotal proof, and then I'll give you the inescapable legal proof. In 1986, I read that information. Okay, it was in a booklet of Meyer's prophecies and predictions that I happened to read at that time. A friend of mine had the book. However, the most important thing is that something like that is, as I said, purely anecdotal at that point. Even if I could produce that book that I have scanned into my computer, people could say it was done later. However, in 1991, the Austrian author, Guido Musburger, put out a book in German in which he put that information in 1991. The same transcript in the original German that I had read in English is in a book, I think it's called Und doch sie fliegen, and yet they fly. And, of course, that book came out in English in 2001. Copyright Library of Congress, same text. And in there you will find, and we show a scan of it on my website, the Red Meteor. Now, this thing is called the Red Meteor by Meyer or the Playaran who told him about it. So let's just kind of recap that a little bit. 1981, this contact he has, he transcribes it. I read it in 86. Let's dismiss that. 1991, a copyrighted published book in German comes out. Now we can't escape it. But what does it say? How do we know? 2001, 3 years before the official discovery of Apophis. It is in English, and we, of course, carry the new edition of it, and still they fly, and, it's on my website. That is legal proof. I can walk into a courtroom and I can say, I can prove that this information was published at this time before our scientists even knew that this thing existed, let alone posed a danger to us. Now, you said, well, you're not so sure about that danger. It could be...
There's a window there.
There's a window, Now, this is where things get, to me, to be enormously amazing, and it actually just happened today that the next piece of the puzzle fell in place. So let me just go back and say, that NASA and scientists, astronomers all over the world agree that this object exists and that it represents some level of threat, but they're minimizing it. Okay, what are we going to do about it, and should we take any action? I know that you've had as a guest Dr. Michio Kaku on your show, and he's
we've had him, sure.
Okay, and he's someone who also is now welcoming the Russian effort because he's saying, if we prepare now, we better our odds of survival. Now, he's not somebody who's a quote-unquote fringe ufologist. They could call people in this field names. He's a very well-respected physicist. So we have to start looking at, well, who are we going to trust here in terms of making a decision. The problem we face, and then I'm going to get to the new piece of information that to me it blew my mind when I got it today. The problem we face is, to be perfectly honest about it, in this day and age, human beings, our attention span is short. The next thing or the latest thing that happens, such as this enormous tragedy in Haiti, understandably takes our attention to it until the next thing comes and we forget about yesterday. 19 years from now or 26 years from now, for many people is, let's worry about it later. What we're being told now by the Russians, and certainly by the extraterrestrial humans who contacted Meyer, if that's indeed true, is that we cannot wait. We should have undertaken this several years ago. We still have some time, and I think we're getting a little bit of an urging, very distantly, hands-off type of a thing to encourage us to jump on this now, because for many of us, we hope we'll all still be here, but our children, grandchildren, other family members, the rest of humanity is on a planet. If this thing does hit the planet in either of those, two windows that astronomers have agreed on, and Meyer's people have said it's the same thing.
2029, 2036.
There it is. If that hits, according to Meyer, this devastates us because it will hit right in the heart of Eastern Europe, Russia, Ukraine, all those countries, Germany. Immediately, you have millions of people dead, and you have tremendous releases of lava and gases, a wall of sulfurous wave starts coming across, the skies darken, all this kind of doom and gloom stuff that we've in a sense become either bored with, overly excited about on the fantasy level, or otherwise don't realize as a possibility, as a reality. I find it difficult. When we hear about something like the Haiti earthquake, it's outside of even the people that are there working who are trained personnel. They find it difficult to grasp the magnitude of what they're facing.
And see, we cannot, as much as we would like to say we can help in a big way, we can't. We can't control these disasters, Michael.
Well, you're right, and unfortunately, and I think I mentioned it last time I was on the show, that Playaran told Meyer some time ago, you're now entering a period of time where environmentally related disasters are going to increase in frequency and intensity, and that, yes, this is largely due to human mismanagement of the planet. I'm sorry, folks, we tried to give you, all this information for 30 years, they said, but you don't learn from prophecies and predictions, and so now you'll have to do the best you can to deal in a catch-up way. And remember, Meyer years ago said environmental refugees are going to number in the tens of millions in the coming years and decades because of environmental damage and change. One thing we are in the position to do something about, even anybody listening to this show, whenever, tonight or another rebroadcast, can write an email or a letter, can reach out, can talk to somebody, do something to urge our government, NASA, to cooperate at least, even if we don't lead the effort, cooperate in an international effort, because time flies when asteroids are flying your way,
absolutely. Too. And Michael, isn't it just a matter of when, not if?
Yes, and scientists know that too, and that's why I don't know what your time is right now, but I've got something interesting to drop on you.
Go ahead, I've got time for you, and then we're going to take calls at the half. Go ahead.
Okay, it goes like this. This morning, or I should say effectively yesterday morning, I got an email from a young Austrian physicist. I know the man. I've met him in Switzerland. He and his brother are physicists, and they work on stuff pertaining to hyperspace propulsion and all this, and they became very interested in the Meyer material. So he writes me this morning, and he said, I've been thinking about this term that they use for this Apophis. Why are they calling it the red meteor? Why the red meteor? And he said, then it popped into my mind that there is something called the Torino scale. And this Torino scale is a measurement that's used, a method of calculating the danger of incoming, and near-Earth orbiting objects. It was created in 1995 by scientists and agreed upon at this kind of scientific convention in Torino, Italy, hence it's called the Torino scale. And I said, I'm looking at this email, where's this going? And then he said, it starts off at a 0 in the white range, where there's really no danger to it. It moves up into yellow and green, and then as the risk to Earth becomes greater, it's in the orange range. He said, however, when it's a certainty of colliding with the Earth, it's in the red range. And I sat there and I looked at this and I got chills. And so he said, this could be, he says, I'm not saying with certainty, he says, this could be their way, by naming it this, of giving us the ultimate clue we need, which this translates to, this is going to hit your planet. This is like something, George, this blew my mind. It's like out of these movies, like a Contact movie or this or that, where they say, well, we're waiting for a signal from the ETs and we're sending messages. If they only can talk to us in a language we understand. They inserted, apparently, the one word that a scientist could find and then cross-reference with a scale. But here's a kicker. The scale wasn't even developed until 1995.
Jeez, he was way ahead.
14 years in advance, they told him, call it the red meteor. Now, there's one more piece of it. Nitpickers, skeptics will say, well, he's calling it a meteor. Why isn't he calling it the asteroid? And here's the last piece of the puzzle that I found. According to something called the Division for Planetary Sciences of the American Astronomical Society, Apophis is a quote-unquote good match for a rare type of stony meteorite known as a type LL chondrite. So they gave Meyer a clue in the first part of it, red. And they told him not to call it an asteroid, but a meteor. And here, in totally unrelated information, people don't know anything about Billy Meyer. They are corroborating this, and it's kind of like, folks, we've asked for some kind, we're all wanting to have contact. Well, they contacted us 24 years ago here. They contacted Meyer 68 years ago or more, and they put the code in the simplest terms. And certainly clear enough for a young physicist to say, wait a minute, red in the Torino scale is collision. Red is collision. Not white, not yellow, not green, not orange. That's the red meteor.
That's a good point.
They are trying to tell us something. Can we wake up enough? Are we smart enough to respond to the thing that we claim we want, let alone survival? Some indication and evidence of conscious, deliberate, high-intelligence contact done not the way we demand it, although we have degrees in our form, they reached out, but in the way that it could benefit us if we will take responsibility for our own survival.
What do you think? What's your gut tell you, Michael?
I don't have a doubt because I've been researching Meyer's case for over 30 years. I've visited with him 11 times in 10 years. I've tried to trick him 4 times in 3 years on an obscure question. He always nails the answer the same way every time. I've checked. Look, I've got a page, this is all linked from your site. When people go to the Apophis page, there's a link to another page I put up where we have 6 separate items that Meyer published, and that we can verify it. Again, copyrights prior to the discovery. And these pertain to things like information about the planet Venus, the terrain, what it looked like, the coloration. Wendell Stevens, who you know of course, sure. He published that information, and he was amazed because he had gone into the U.S. Geological Society to look at a topographical map of Venus that they were making, and he said, oh my gosh, that exactly mirrors what Meyer told us a year before. How did the man know that? How could he have known that? He's just a simple farmer living in the boonies in Switzerland, but he nailed those details. And here, the U.S. Geological Service is making a map that conforms to what he said. And what about the information he published as far back as 1976? It's in copyrighted books. And in there, he's told about the discovery of water on Mars, the discovery of small micro life forms, and the fact that the environment there is going to be hostile to human life. All 3 of those elements were discovered and confirmed in 2008 between August and September. He published it 30 2 years before. In 1958, he foretold that there were 2 planets beyond Pluto. Well, how do you know 58? That letter could have been, okay, fine.
Sure.
In 1978, he published it, and Wendell Stevens reported it in the book that's called UFO Contact from the Pleiades, a preliminary investigation report. I show that on my website. People can look for free. Oh, yeah, you buy an ebook and you can read the whole thing, but there it is. As a matter of fact, if I quote Wendell Stevens, he says, then he stated that there are also 2 more small planets orbiting our sun, both beyond Pluto and both smaller than Pluto. One of them is quite a ways beyond. He said that it was not the time for us to discover these bodies technically yet, but that they would be identified and studied in the future. That was from Meyer speaking to Wendell Stevens in 1978. The book has a copyright of like 1980 or 82. Those 2 planets or planetoids were not discovered till after 2000.
You know, an Apophis is only about, 1,100 feet wide, right?
Approximately, yeah, I guess 350 meters according to what Myers told him, and that was confirmed, basically by the discovery. Now, one other thing that clued me in on this red meteor thing, because I'd often wondered, on the same other page on my website, there's an article there about Comet Tutatis. Now, you remember that was a big deal.
Sure.
Well, in 78, Meyer not only predicted it, he said it would be named Tutatis, and we show the German book in which that information was published. Now, he said it would be named Tutatis, and then in 1989 they discover it and they name it Tutatis. So why did he get that, kooky thing here with red meteor? Well, they wanted us to do a little work. If we're not paying attention to Meyer in 89 when he tells us, when they announce what this new asteroid is going to be called Tutatis, and Meyer's already published that 11 years before, well, maybe make them dig a little bit. So sure enough, young Mr. Hanekamp in Austria there emails me this yesterday morning and says, hey, red meteor? That's collision course with Earth in the Torino scale. That's a scientific scale, created, as we said, what was it, about...
some time ago.
Yeah, 14 years after Meyer.
I think it was 1995.
95, and that's 14 years after Meyer had first published the information, and, a mere 3 or 4 years after it's already in Guido's book. So we have proof to a legal standard. I've been trying to get Mike Shermer and Philip Plate to respond, and suddenly I had a wonderful email dialogue going on with Michael Shermer about UFOs. Of course, we disagree. He suddenly has disappeared. I think he is stumped. They can't kick this one around. He can't play with little, alien dolls when you're talking about copyrighted information. And I want that. I had suggested, why don't we get Michael on to, take a shot at this, huh?
Stay with us. We're going to take phone calls with Michael Horn next as we talk about the asteroid Apophis on Coast to Coast AM.
Get daily show updates right to your inbox for free with the new Coast Zone newsletter. Sign up today at coasttocoastam.com.
Brought to you by the American Water Works Association and your local water provider.
Great basketball heats up the West for another winter. Catch what's happening inside today's program with me, Adam Rowe, on JP, weekday morning at 6:40, right now on 1110.
Earth angel, will you be mine, my darling dear? Love you all the time. I'm just a fool, in love with you.
Call the Wildcard line at area code 818-501-4109. The first-time caller line is area code 818-501-4721. To talk to George toll-free from east of the Rockies, call 1-800-825-5033. West of the Rockies, toll-free at 1-800-618-8255. International callers may reach George Noory by calling your in-country Sprint access number, pressing option 5, and dialing toll-free 800-893-0903. From the City of Angels, this is Coast to Coast AM with George Noory.
Well, on our next Coast to Coast program, it'll be our Friday night into Saturday morning open lines with a few spooky things tossed in there. When we come back, let's take your phone calls now with Michael Horn as we talk about Billy Meyer and Apophis on Coast to Coast AM.
Men, are you thinking about the health of your prostate? Recently, New Vitality Health Products gave away 500 free bottles of the supplement Beta Prostate to listeners of this station. Due to incredible demand, they're giving away more free bottles of Beta Prostate to any new customers who call now. Beta Prostate is packed with plant sterols that support your prostate health. Remember, your prostate affects urine flow, sleeping habits, intimacy, and overall quality of life. Beta Prostate is so powerful, you'd have to take 100 saw palmetto capsules in order to get the same natural plant sterols as one Beta Prostate. And if you haven't tried Beta Prostate yet, you can call right now for a free bottle. You only pay shipping and handling. Call 1-800-416-1671. This offer is limited to one free bottle per household. Give your body nutrition that targets the prostate. Call now and try Beta Prostate for free. Call 1-800-416-1671. That's 1-800-416-1671. 1-800-416-1671.
Individual results may vary. Program not available in all states. See contract for complete terms.
If your credit card debt is out of control, if you're in over your head dealing with monthly payments, there is powerful information you need to know about the government's bailout of credit card companies. If you have more than $10,000 in credit card debt, you have the right to settle that debt for a fraction of what you owe with monthly payments you can afford. Credit card companies have been given billions and need to clean their books once and for all. And that's great news for you. We're Credit Answers, and we'd like to offer you free information that will show you how to settle your credit card debt with payment plans customized for you. It's yours free by calling 1-800-200-1323. Don't declare bankruptcy. Give us 10 minutes and learn how we have saved our clients millions. Live better, debt-free. For free information on how to settle your credit card debt in a government bailout era, call 1-800-200-1323. That's 1-800-200-1323. 1-800-200-1323.
Your home for Fox News, 1110 KFAB.
Now, Michael, you know how Billy got the information, but are there some folks out there puzzled, baffled at how he got it?
I'm sorry, did you say are the scientists puzzled?
Yeah.
Well, of course, because most of the people that you're going to speak with are not going to accept the idea of an extraterrestrial contact.
No.
It does come up as, look, I went onto an astronomy.com website to post the information that's in the press release simply about the warning. They went and they looked at the links, and as soon as they saw that it had anything to do with ETs and UFOs, which I had to put in,
you went, right?
Oh, yeah. They were really angry. And, I mean, I'm going, well, if astronomers aren't interested in the threat of Apophis, and if astronomers even aren't interested in any valid evidence for extraterrestrial life, UFOs, what are they looking at? Are they stamp collectors? So, to answer your question, it is very difficult, and that's why there hasn't been anything overt. We always say, people that are interested in this, I wish some extraterrestrials would land, I'd like to meet them or this, that. That represents really a fractional view in terms of overall humanity. Of the 7.5 billion people on the planet, a very, very small percentage could handle being, just to use the accurate word, confronted by the inescapable reality that there are other beings who live in this universe, who can come and go, and who are operating completely outside of the constraints of our military, economy, anything else. We can't control them. Human beings, we don't like that uncertainty. We don't like that implicit threat, even if it doesn't exist. Hence, in in the Meyer case, the only one that I can say I can document and show is a true extraterrestrial contact case and still going on. Hence, they remain aloof from any possible hard proof, although there's 5 other people that have photographed their craft. The 6th one is a skeptic, a Swiss skeptic, photographed the Meyer, the Playaran craft and sent the photos to Meyer and asked if he could come over and talk to him, which he did. So there are people like David Froning, who is a scientist, who is a very high-level astrophysicist, who shared the stage with me at the Biltmore Hotel years ago when I made a presentation there in Los Angeles. And he got up and he said, my colleagues and I may have made breakthroughs in our understanding about hyperspace propulsion from Billy Meyer's information from the Playaran. And if this is a hoax, he's being advised by some very knowledgeable scientists.
Yeah, exactly. Some great futurists, right?
Amazing. Yeah. But, I mean, with track records that nobody's got. So somewhere in here, those of us who want more than just to be titillated and fascinated and really get that our world could be threatened and that part of this whole mission of Meyer's, as I've said for years, is to help us assure our own future survival. And they've given us the clues directly.
You know what's so scary about this too is, even though we're talking about 2029, 2036, anything could happen from today up to this point from any other asteroid.
Well, it's not only that, but they have been very specific about some other things that are going to happen. They won't give dates, but one of them is the 9.0 earthquake that runs for 5 minutes off the coast, up northern, western coast of the States, off the area of Portland, and that then generates a tsunami that's going to just be devastating. Now, they published this, Meyer published it, and here's the strange thing. Now scientists concur almost with the exact details. That fault up there is very vulnerable, and there was recently a 6.5 earthquake up off the California coast, northern California. Yeah. So they have told us other things about what will happen when the La Palma volcano in the Canary Islands goes, and that our country must make contingency plans and should have been doing it years ago so that there can be evacuation routes for people on the east coast of the United States. This doesn't seem real to us.
No, it doesn't. But boy, if it happened, biblical nightmare. I'm telling you.
Absolutely, 20 to 30 million people.
Let's go to final calls here, Michael. Let's go to Mike, who is truck driving in Utah, west of the Rockies. Hey, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, George, always interested in what Michael Horn has to say. I think it's very fascinating. One prediction that I was wondering if Billy Meyer ever made is anything doing with a Planet X scenario. I've never heard anything from Michael or Billy on that one.
Well, here's the thing. Meyer has said that there's something that they call the Dark Wanderer, and that Nibiru, which a lot of people think is the 12th planet, really isn't, isn't a planet. It's more like a large comet, and that this Dark Wanderer, which I think they're equating with Nibiru, will probably be closer to 2012. It's going to be sort of on the outer fringes, but they're not seeing at this point, certainly they haven't given, I should put it this way, a specific warning about that to us. The information that seems to be, jumping more, certainly in my face right now, in terms of something we should attend to now, it's still futural, Mike. It is the Apophis asteroid. There are plenty of other things. Just to throw it in the mix, since you ask, and it's not about Planet X, but Meyer started warning about climate change in 51 and global warming, but he said all these other manifestations. This is where people miss the boat because they say, well, global warming, we're having the coldest winter ever. He didn't say it was only global warming. He said that the manifestations would be extreme cold, storms, blizzards, earthquakes, all this stuff, because we have contributed to imbalancing the planet. Global warming is natural, but not to the degree that we are experiencing it. So we have coming imminently to us challenges all over the planet from such things as the melting of the icebergs. I'm jumping around here, but we have to start comprehensively understanding as the icebergs melt, that water, that pressure is moving into the seas, and the pressure is being released on the land where they formerly were compressing through their great weight. The increased weight now moves into the seas where it presses on the tectonic plates, increased seaquakes, earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis, and you get on the land masses that are coming up, you'll eventually have earthquakes happening in places where there were formerly glaciers. So we've got a lot to look at here, and I know this sounds awfully doom and gloom, and I don't mean it that way. I just mean to say we've been warned. Let's wake up and start taking some of the hints as to what we still can do.
Okay, next up we go. Thanks, Mike, by the way, for your question. Dustin, Florida. Chris, good morning, Chris. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. I actually had a couple of questions.
Sure.
One question is, what is the actual percentage chance that Apophis will hit Earth? The second question that I have is the gravitational changes that would happen if it got close enough to actually affect the Earth, like the Moon does. Another question that I also had, I'm sorry, but the government cover-up kind of seems like that it would be easier to allow people to carry on with their everyday lives than it would be to actually tell people that this was actually coming. The end of the world coming kind of seems like that people would take advantage of it. You know, you would have medieval times, raping, pillaging, and plundering, as opposed to, hey, there's a light in the sky, kaboom, kind of thing.
Right. Well, let's try and... Can I try and take some of those so I don't forget them? First of all, let's just...
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Let's just put it this way. We're not talking about the end of the world forever, nobody's here anymore. We're just talking about enormous devastation, which is, for those who are affected, it's the end of the world. Now, as for that object, the odds, I understand the current odds, I think we quoted NASA now saying 1 in 330,000. Well, I wouldn't want to bet anything on that because there are many variables in terms of it, and you can figure for yourself, well, what if they're wrong? What if they're off a little? Now, as for the gravitational pull, this is only, quote-unquote, only 1,100 or so feet wide. I don't know, because I'm not a physicist, that in of itself would exert any form of gravitational effect. However, the fact that other planets and objects can exert a gravitational pull on it, that any number of possibilities could affect the trajectory, the orbit, the incoming, that is there. But the real clue here is that we're told in this information I just went over before about red meteor, we're being warned that it's going to hit. So we can either put our stock in what NASA is saying, or we might want to throw in our energy more towards what the Russians are saying, which is this is coming. We want to deflect it. Never mind 101 in 330,000. It's going to hit because, again, I think the Russians, certainly most governments have already studied Meyer's material, but I think the Russians have taken it very much to heart. And as for keeping a cover-up, so yes, I think it is the idea that perpetuating the status quo is the mindset of bureaucrats, so you can't look to leadership any longer coming, for the most part, from those levels.
Okay, very good. Next up, we go to Toronto, Canada, wildcard line. Hey, Martin, go ahead.
Hey, well, just from hearing the last thing, I was just curious as to, rephrase my question, sorry. What sort of deflection methods do you believe that the Russians may have, or even the Canadians or the Americans?
Right. Well, let me first tell you specifically what Meyer was told. And this is, again, either we're dealing with an extraterrestrial contact, or we've got a guy in Switzerland who, for some reason, living on a farm, can come up with all this stuff, and now the Russians seem to be echoing it, and his track record is, pretty impeccable, and blah, blah, blah. So let me try to,
set the tone, sort of.
Yeah, I just lost the actual focus of what I was going to say.
Well, what are the Russians doing?
Okay, right, and what they're doing is echoing what the advice here, except right now they're saying they want to find a way to deflect it, but they don't think that, a nuclear explosion would be the right way, and maybe, having some kind of landing on it or this or that. But here's the weird part about it. Meyer was told specifically, first of all, he was told, you must not blow it up. You must use a nuclear device, but you must not blow up the asteroid because that'll rain down, hell on you. And forget about using, solar sails or, trying to land on this asteroid or anything. Impractical and nearly impossible. So the Russians are kind of almost there. They don't yet think, at least from what I read most recently, that they want to use a nuclear means to do it. But I think that they're going to understand, and I'm going to bet on this, if they put this project together, it will ultimately be that they're going to send a nuclear device to explode it to create a shock wave to deflect the asteroid. And again, this was written in 1981 and described by this man. So we're given the clue as to the danger level, that this thing exists. It's called the red asteroid, and the way you get it to not be a threat to your world is to explode a nuclear device, create the shock wave to push it off course. Thank you very much.
And if you don't, though, you may turn it into little pieces that could scatter all over the place.
All over the place.
Like a shotgun.
Exactly, and worse, the stuff's coming down hot and fast and hard and heavy.
That's all we need, right?
Yeah.
British Columbia and Canada. Hey, John, it's your turn on the international line.
Well, thank you very much.
Sure thing, John.
Michael, I'm the John who had hoped to bring you to BC last year.
Hi, John.
How are you? I guess the best way to introduce my input is that basically humans, in our discussions here on this program, we come from, realms of what is knowledge and what is belief.
Yes.
And in listening to Stanton Friedman earlier this evening, he came right out and said that the real intrudes upon the theoretical. Now, with the case of Meyer, I happen to know through family members and a friend of my family members that back in time, Stanton Friedman attended a UFO conference in St. Paul, Alberta, and one of the parties, it was actually the friend of my family members, who was in the washroom during a break after Stanton Friedman had given his presentation, and he came right out and asked, what is your perception of the Meyer case? And basically it was poo-pooed. Now, it's not to take away from the fact that he could sort of like research a little more, as you have, and come to terms with knowledge, okay? And I basically agree that you speak from knowledge with 30 years of research in that particular case with respect to Meyer. So I just want the listeners to know that Stanton Friedman, considered the father of modern ufology, at one time poo-pooed the Meyer case. And back in time, let's say in the 70s, actually the St. Paul UFO conference happened in the 80s, I believe, the information had been presented as you present on this show. The predictions and everything else goes on with that case. So I would like the listenership to know that Stanton Friedman, who is, basically placed on a pedestal, should actually be on the same program as yourself. And I tie that in with the fact that you would like to have another go with Michael Shermer.
I'd like to have my first go with Michael Shermer, yeah.
This is all based on knowledge, skepticism, belief system, etc., etc. We're humans. We need to know, and we need to open up as much as you have.
Well, John,
I certainly appreciate everything you've done.
Well, thank you. I would say this, that as we realize, hopefully, that we're all in it together, we can set our various beliefs and egos and other things aside. I probably have perspectives that other people will be able to show me are wrong on things. It's fine. I just want the truth. I think Stanton does too, and he's done a lot of work and pioneering, and this was something that for whatever reason he didn't feel comfortable about. He doesn't campaign against it. He ignores it, and a lot of people in the UFO community do. That's okay. I'm going to be the vocal advocate for it because I have spent so much time, and let me give credit where it's due. Without Wendell Stevens and Britt Elders and Lee Elders and Jim Dilatoso and these people doing all the seminal investigation, research, analysis, and publishing so that this could come to the world, I wouldn't have been attracted. I wouldn't have known that it existed, and other people wouldn't have, and I couldn't have, I've met all those people with the exception of Jim Dilatoso, and I've certainly met Meyer, his family, other witnesses, friends, people who witnessed the assassination attempts in his life. So I've gotten second, third, and first-hand as close to this as I can. I have friends of mine last May were with Meyer when he came outside and he was interacting with one of the ships from the Pleiaren, a small disk in the sky. They saw that. One of them was at least, I think, a physicist, and there was a woman from Australia. So this is real to people who have delved in enough. And at this point we should say, okay, so it's real. So what do we know? The information's accurate. I don't know about ETs, but I want us to act on the information that's proving to be true. If we could get Michael Shermer and Phil Plait and other people who pardon me, have their egos up front a little, more than sometimes their willingness to be scientific and objective, and have that second part of their description, not just skeptic but scientist, in the fore, we would make some progress here.
Yes, I mean, there's no question Stanton has been a critic of Billy Meyer for a long time, and Jacques Vallée has as well.
Yeah, and it's mainly because they don't have any real evidence. And I guess as long as we're saying it, let me say one other thing, and Wendell Stevens will vouch for this. What did happen was that Stanton wanted to be in on the investigation when Wendell first was coming back with the photos and all this stuff, and he and other ufologists wanted to take control of it. And Wendell said, no, we're not going to allow that to happen. We're turning this stuff over to labs and scientific experts and photographic experts, not to ufologists. And that was the point at which Stanton Friedman, from what I understand, turned a cold shoulder on it. But that's okay. The rest of us, we can go forward if we choose to.
Billy, in addition to everything else, we've only got 30 seconds left. He has warned of an impending Third World War, beginning either in November of 2006, 8, 10, or 11. So we're getting pretty close to that, too, Michael.
Well, the thing is that humanity actually has been pushing that back. That's why that is not a prediction. It's a prophecy, and it is up to people individually. You don't have to know anything about Billy Meyer. The more people desire peace, work towards it, do all those things that we can in consciousness, we stave off a Third World War. We're going to have more trouble from the environment. And there's a free gift for anybody that orders our film, The Silent Revolution of Truth, if they put that in there, that they heard us here, just right free in their order. That's my pitch and my product.
Thank you, Michael Horn. His website, theyfly.com. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladesseur, Ross Mitchell, George Knapp, Ian Punnett, and Art Bell, I'm George Noory. Somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.